It. All right. Woo! What's up,
Hello.
buddy?
Hey, it's dark here. Probably dark where you are. It's a little dark in my room, but whatever.
It's all
We're
good,
good.
man. I'm just glad it's okay. Welcome to Zan's Easy Podcast. We'll just jump right into it. Um,
Why
Rad,
not?
Raddest of Daddest here joined. You know what? We haven't dubbed you. I've thought about this. I
Hmm.
feel like I feel like if I'm shooting from the hip, there's a few ideas, mostly because you're going to be in the future and from now on kind of the music history guy. So I feel
Got
like
it.
and conjoining that with the most recent awesome news of you being a dad, we could call you Music Dad.
That works. I'll take it.
Perfect.
I'll
Perfect.
take it.
I mean, in keeping with today's topic of the replacements, I feel like it works pretty well that way.
For
Um,
sure. I'll take it.
all right, so let's just get into it because I've been dying to talk about this band. I always want to talk about the replacements, specifically because for me, this is the quintessential American Midwest band.
100%. I'll agree with you on that. I'll say them. And well, if we're just looking at like Midwestern band, like quintessential Midwestern band, rock and roll band, I'd say them and Husker Du.
Mm-hmm.
Without question. Both started out as punk rock bands, but eventually they're just rock and roll bands, and they're literally, I think, any, like you said, I just feel like anybody that starts a band in the Midwest, whatever kind of music it is, eventually you hit that road, that wall where it's like replacement. You have to go through the replacements and Husker Du wall to keep moving forward. I think
Right.
it's just what it is.
It's the road you have to inevitably you have to take this road, and you may not like that road, but
Mm-hmm.
you have to appreciate that road or the journey at least.
100%.
I avoided this band in the way that I had seen them listed so many times in Rolling Stone. And I guess this is the part where we'll talk about our experiences with this band.
Sure.
I avoided this band for a long time, I would say in my teens. Like I'd heard Bastards of Young, I'd heard, we'll say, I Will Follow, or like the college radio hit stuff of them.
Yeah.
And
The
I'd always been,
classics.
yeah, I'd always been like, yeah, that's legit. That's a good. I dig that song. I vibe with it.
Mm.
Um, but it really synergized for me when I became more of a dad and more into like history. And I thought about Minneapolis, Minnesota as like where it was. And I mean, right out the bat, well, I'll list my sources: Bob Mears, Trouble Boys, and there's specifically a ton of information to be found online. No Dogs in Space did an amazing 5-part series on the replacements. I think there
Mm.
should be a movie on this band, like hands down, or like a limited series, because the story
It,
is.
the story's great. They did try to do a documentary.
Mhm.
They did. It's called. I want to say it's called "Color Me Impressed." I can't remember the name of it,
Which is a great name.
but yeah, but it's an all right documentary in the fact that you get the story of the replacements. But the only downfall with it is
Mhm.
that they didn't sign off on it, so there's no replacements
Ah,
music in it. I don't think, and from what I remember, and there's none of the members talking in the movie. So they tried it. None of them are like into the idea, and mostly Paul is.
yeah,
Why does he doesn't want to do that? So, which makes sense.
of course, of course.
Yeah.
But like I said, I avoided these guys, and then when I became more of a history guy, I don't know what is going on in Minneapolis, or sorry, yeah, in it is in Minnesota in 1984. You had
Mhm.
you had Let It Be, you had Zen Arcade by Husker Du, and you had Purple Rain by Prince.
Yeah, and I want to say another band that's well, I think they're Milwaukee, but they're still really Midwest punk band. Die Kreutzen was around as well, and I think Die Kreutzen's first record came out around then. I want to say 83, 84. Either way, there was like Minneapolis, like you were saying, was very diverse. You had uh, Prince, and then the so-called Purple Snow movement, or well, what Numero would later call the Purple Snow movement, which was a collection of artists kind of doing the punk or the funk thing like Prince. You had Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis coming out of that scene, who would eventually go on to produce Janet Jackson's solo record and Rhythm Nation, and I want to say the follow-up after
I
that.
love that album, by the way, Rhythm Nation. I'll
Yeah,
still
it's
listen to.
crazy.
I think
It's
Janet
crazy.
Jackson's criminally underrated as a Jackson, like, obviously family member, but like maybe the
Yeah.
best other than Michael as far as
Oh,
like
for sure. For
output.
sure. I mean, uh, the well, now we're getting in it. Don't get me started on
Sorry,
Jackson Five
sorry, we'll
thing.
get in the weeds with music
But
history with John here.
but I was gonna say, because you brought up Minneapolis, this is the collection I was talking about that Numero made. I don't know if anybody can see this. It's called Purple Snow,
Nice.
and it's basically the Minneapolis sound that is what Prince came out of, and it's a pretty good collection of like bands that like Numero is typically known for, like putting out a collection that's filled with groups or artists that only had one single, maybe in a regional sound. And
Mhm.
Minneapolis definitely had a regional R&B, soul, funk sound for sure. But then, to our point where we're here, they had a pretty good a bar band scene. But then when punk rock came along, it kind of everybody decided to, instead of play top 40, why not play your own songs? And that's where
Yeah,
we got the Replacements and the Husker Du's of the world. So,
of course.
and what's the other one? Commandos. What were they called? The Suicide Commandos. Is that the
Yeah,
name of the band?
yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're called. I think it's Suicide Commandos. They're from
Mhm.
Minneapolis too, and that was kind of like, Minneapolis had that record store. What is it? Or Joke, or I can't.
I know. I just saw. I mean, I read the book, or the
Yeah,
audio. I listened to the audio version of the book, and it's like every time they said it, I was like, man, that is a mouthful. But it's like a Midwest mouthful, like Or Job or Folk Records or something,
that's it. Yeah, or folk.
which is where Peter Jesperson worked, and kind
Yeah,
of where Paul brought very, very Midwesternly, sheepishly brought in his demo tape from a tape he ganked from his sister.
exactly.
It
Yeah,
said
so it's like
Santana on it.
I read that book, the Trouble Boys book. I want to say it has to be a couple years ago now. So I
Yeah,
don't have. It's not like
2016.
fresh. It's not fresh on my mind. Um, but I remember what I remember from it. I mean, anyway. So we digress. We were talking
No,
about Minneapolis, but
no, we got to. This is what they want. I mean, you got to
well,
think
you
it's
want
going to be two
you
different people who have never, who are curious about the replacements, and then replacements purists who are going to be looking for any nook and cranny of info we can just shoot out there
for
that they
sure.
don't know.
So you didn't get them until later.
Yeah, I want to say
Later,
20s ish is when I really got into them. When in my 20s, I would order, like, mass order CDs or download them on the internet whenever I
yeah,
get a paycheck in the service. And I got Tim, Let It Be, and Pleased to Meet Me all in one go. And right off the bat, I was in love. Like,
yeah.
I remember putting in Pleased to Meet Me and hearing Alex Chilton for the first time on my own and being
Hmm.
like, oh, this slaps. And then going from that to like something like Skyway on the same album, which is one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. Like,
Hmm.
and immediately identifying with that sense of like, I'm a romantic, and like just the longing of like some girl on a skyway and you just like remarking on it. I mean, the best songs are usually stripped down to the most basic sense, and that's
Hmm.
fundamentally where Paul Westerberg comes in the band. He's one of the most genius songwriters ever, and in some of the lyrics in some of the songs are so beautiful, like that, like it's almost um part of what is so incredible about the band, in that you get lyrics like and I'll pull it up so that I don't mess it up, but there's
Hmm.
certain lyrics to certain songs that fit so timelessly well that
Yeah.
it doesn't matter at what point you hear them, they just speak true in almost like a biblical sense. um
Yeah.
but
I agree with that. I mean, and speaking on his lyrics, like it's at one. at certain points you'll get something that's super, like you said, really beautiful and poignant, but then on the other hand you'll get like the dumbest shit you've ever heard. You know what I
Gary's got a
mean? Like,
boner.
yeah, you're just like, even in some of the serious songs, some of the lines are just so dumb. They're just like he wrote them to rhyme with something else, and they're just dumb, but they work really well.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? So it
Well, that
doesn't, whatever makes it seem like it's kind of dumb, it's really not. It's almost like idiot savant-esque type thing with him.
yeah,
I really
yeah.
believe. So
No, and it's what's beautiful about bands like the Replacements are when you see so and we're gonna transition into the history of the band. I mean, we'll say that I'll say this off the top. There's 7 releases and an EP, like a
mhm.
seven albums proper in an EP. But transitioning into that, I want to say that if you don't know the band The Replacements, they're incredible. But uh, I would preface what we're about to go into by saying this: if you're a history person and you don't know The Replacements, this band is rich with history and connections. Whether it's like we mentioned with Prince, I mean, Paul bumps into Prince at one point at like Seventh Avenue or whatever the venue was,
Yeah,
and there's an interesting story there too. But um, the Replacements in turn influence bands like the Pixies, and the Pixies in turn create bands like Nirvana. The,
yeah,
the Replacements are fundamentally at the core of what has been like the 20th into the 21st century of music.
for sure. I know you mentioned you got into him later. I got into him. I know. I'll go back here real quick,
Go
just so I
ahead.
get this out of the way.
Totally.
I was gonna say, because I knew you were gonna ask like when we each kind of got into it. Um, but yeah, bought. I got into the replacement probably about the age of 15 when
Good age to get
I
into them.
yeah, when I heard an interview with Green Day or something, and Billy Joe had, or no, they were on 120 minutes, like a special for 120 minutes in like '96, celebrating 10 years. And Green Day was on it, and Billy Joe was talking about, yeah, we'd only watch it to sit around and wait for that cool Replacements video with the cigarette and the speaker. It turns out it was the video for Bastards of Young.
Oh wow.
So I come to, a few months later, I go out to Media Play on Alpine. You remember Media Play on
Oh yeah.
Alpine?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I at this point had a car, and I remember I really was like, I had a car, and I was kind of hanging out with this girl that I met over the summer that lived out by Media Play. Anyway, I went into Media Play. Her friend was working there, and I remember buying Tim and driving to her house in my car, or to this girl's house in my car. And it was in the fall. So every time I hear the song Hold My Life, it just reminds me of fall in Michigan. It's literally,
So beautiful.
it solidifies. It's that, like, every time I hear it, I can picture like the exact street that I was on, the way the street lights hit the leaves, the browning leaves, Um, it's that, like, that kind of did it for me. And then after that, I went backwards and I got Stink, actually, before Let It Be. And anyway, we'll go through the records now. But yeah, I've been into the Replacements from like a very young age. I
And
love this band.
I do too. And don't and just because I got into them a little later, I would say don't, it doesn't lessen it because
No, 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 not at all.
for you, that's a beautiful thing. For it to tie specifically to memories is fundamentally why I love music to begin with.
Yeah.
That band hit right as I was falling in love too. So it
Mhm.
like ties to specific memories of like real like changes in my life as well, whether it's like hearing Swingin' Party in a car, like driving home after your heart is just so full of joy and that experience.
Yeah.
That song is like the elevator music in my head constantly. Um,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna go off the cuff a little bit with some of the history, and
Sure.
you can chime in with whatever you want to. I love any additions to that sort of thing, but specifically Paul, he was raised obviously in Minneapolis, or yeah, in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, and his experience is so like Americana. Like his dad had a dream of being a professional golfer and even hit a hole in one at one point in his life, which I only know one person who did that, my uncle, and he's got a plaque in his house that says that shit. So
I
cheers to
mean,
him. That's pretty
it's pretty,
badass.
yeah, it's not an easy thing to do.
I
So,
mean, if you can do it in Wii golfing, it doesn't really count, folks. But I'm saying this is some sick shit. So
yeah,
his dad was I don't think necessarily a bad guy, but when we flip over to Bobby and Tommy, things get real sad. Bob Stinson is one of the best lead guitar players in my mind of maybe of all time, and especially in a Midwest like rock band sense. Like listening to Sorry Ma and Stink, and even some of the stuff that he did in that center era of the Replacements is still just like there's something about his addition, his spice to the mix that is just perfect.
yeah. It's he adds the to like the structure. He adds the chaos to the group, which kind of is befitting of his life growing up. Was pretty chaotic and pretty rough. Like his guitar playing is very rough and very you know, just kind of noisy and kind of disgusting in a way, but awesome.
It's
But
what I love the most about Bob is it almost sounds like it's like if your lead guitar player is almost mocking you in the song, and in a band full
yeah,
of guys who are literally always ribbing each other. And
yeah,
so to get the idea here, uh Paul immediately picked up guitar pretty quickly and was like, this is my vibe, like I am down with this. And if I had to place two major influences on Paul Westerberg and his songwriting, especially early on, it's a weird combination, but it works. Rod Stewart and the Sex Pistols,
I get it.
specifically the veracity of the Sex Pistols coming out of the gate. Never mind the bollocks. I mean, it's a huge release and it
Yeah,
changed the world. But also seeing Rod Stewart and his band at the time, I think they're called the
the
Hand,
faces.
the
Well,
Faces.
he
Yeah,
the
I would call
faces,
them the Hand in my
the
head.
faces, and yeah, the guitar tone that's in the guitar playing that Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols did was pretty like he I think him and Johnny Thunders from the New York Dolls were the two big influences, like rock and
Yes.
roll influences on Paul Westerberg. But yeah, of course, like the Faces, Ronnie Wood, who now plays with the Rolling Stones. I think he was also a big influence on Paul Westerberg as for the songwriting aspect of it and like the hook and the
Yes.
melody. And I think Johnny Thunders and Steve Jones were more the I don't give a fuck side of it all, you know?
Yeah, but that's
So
the perfect mix.
yeah, it's
And
like the perfect combo.
we talked about this actually, and I'm only saying this because I believe that words are repetitions that become actions. As long as you continue to say them, they'll become a reality. And I'm saying this because I'm trying to remind myself and remind Matt that he needs to get to like posting and editing what we did last summer. But
Mm-hmm.
we talked about the way that the humility of our friends, and when it comes to music that we make ourselves. Like I think we're that's a huge dose of what the Replacements has as well. Like that's the same approach even that they have to their own music, where it's almost like, yeah, fuck that shit, like I don't want to do the
Yeah,
same take again.
to almost a comically bad fault, like to like to the point where like the Replacements shot themselves. They should have been such a bigger band than they are, but
Mm-hmm.
they shot themselves in the foot so much, and I think it is because they have that Midwest thing about them, which is a curse that all of us, most Midwestern musicians, especially in punk or alternative music scenes, we're just too. You don't want to gloat. You don't want to say that oh, my shit's great or this is great, but we definitely know people that do. But I almost feel like when you say that, you're like, it feels too
feels
like
gross.
narcissistic and
Yes,
weird, which it shouldn't be because it's art and you should be proud of it. And you should be like, yeah, I did that. It's awesome. But
totally.
that's
Well,
just not
no,
how we were built.
it isn't, but we also gain a lot of um we gain a lot of the stability in our pursuits from our friends as well. You know,
For
it's
sure.
almost like taking the steam out of them ribbing us before they can even get to it helps us in processing what we did. But just like in Paul Westerberg's case, where he would slip the tapes to Peter Jesperson as a way to say, like, hey, you know, check this out. If it's, you know, if you got time after you're folding your shirts or, you know, listening to your LPs at home, maybe just slip it into the tape deck. I don't know. I mean, it sucks. Just throw it away. But
Yeah.
the validation that he would in turn get from Peter and even from, like, say, his sister, who he's really close with, um was it was what that would push him forward. And people like Paul are really inspirations to me too, in like in a similar vein to what things that I heard Chris Cornell say in his life, where it was like, whatever it is, just keep making, keep creating, like, don't stop. You know, if it sucks, it sucks, it's cool, you laugh at it. And one of the ways that I've connected on that too is, like, I tried singing for a brief period in my 20s, and I remember distinctly the first time I had to play that for Rob Burt, who was the drummer in my band at the time. And
Mhm.
I said at some point in the song, um I sang the line, like, my spaceship is coming down. And like the look on Rob's face when he heard me say spaceship to this day makes us laugh like kids, like literally, like piss ourselves laughing. But it's that shit is great because it's like, you did it, you tried it, at least you
Yeah.
fucking tried it. It's better than like sitting there going like, I don't know, man, I got this song about aliens I want to write, I'll never do it. You know, it's like, it's better to do than not. And
Yeah. And you know, not, I think to your point, like you're saying, not all the time, you know, not everything you do or to, yeah, not everything you do is going to be great,
exactly.
but
Totally.
at least you're trying. And I think, you know, the one time when you do get the positive reactions, it makes you go, okay, I'm on to something. Why don't I just follow that path and
Totally.
see where it takes me? And that's a great thing. And I think we have that, you know, we have at least have that support in the scene that we play music in for sure. So
Totally.
that's
I
great.
mean,
And
you
submitted right.
have your own Peter Jesperson, I'm sure, like people that you'll turn to. I have the same, like, people I'll send like things and they'll give me like that, like, point blank, like, this sucks dick, or this is like legit cool, like, you need to
Yeah.
pursue this. Um
Yeah, for sure.
and Bob was the same way with his brother Tommy, which we'll get into this now. I mean, Tommy was 12 when this band starts. And I related to that immediately too, because my brother was 16 when he joined Lights at Sea. And it was the same thing where when I was young, again, like learning the history and reading the book, it was like the same story in some ways, where he'd seen me playing guitar, and, you know, I didn't have to lure him with Coke and Reese's Pieces or Snickers bars the same way Bob did for Tommy. But it was a very similar thing where uh, Bob was specifically influenced huge by the band Yes. Classic Yes is a huge influence for me. I love prog rock. And if you love prog rock, that's totally cool. Progressive rock, if you will. It's a
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
It's a thing that, like, for me is like, most people will say it's adjacent to an almost an extrapolation of, say, psych rock from the 60s. People wanted to have, you know, more technical things like King Crimson, uh
It's it's
early Genesis.
100%. Yeah, it's 100% like an arm of the psychedelic rock movement from the 60s. Like had Lemmy stayed in Hawkwind, who knows what Hawkwind would have sounded like? I don't know. I mean, I think Lemmy, you know, was making it, didn't want to do the progressive thing. And then if you look at when he left Hawkwind, they definitely went down that path for sure.
Well,
Um, but
the
I'm a big,
genres,
I like Yes too. I like Yes too.
I
And
mean, Chris Ford,
Genesis, I do.
totally. It's my fault that the Zanzizi Instagram is always posting Genesis videos, because what the fuck ever.
Yeah.
But it is true. Like it and those genres really benefit each other. The offshoots that come, like say punk rock. I Henry Rollins, I remember reading distinctly him being like, yeah, I got really fucking tired of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And then it was like, let's make fucking punk rock music, you know, like let's strip it
Yeah.
down, let's make it simple, stupid, you know, like let's make it genuine, because there is some immediate authenticity that you can get from things like punk music and in genres that came from the reaction of bands like Yes and that thing. And Paul was of that ilk too. It was like, you know, like I'm not saying that he didn't like Yes or anything, but he would hear it every time he would be doing his janitor job. And these guys are all like literally quit school or like fuck school. This shit's for the birds. I want to play music. And Paul literally would hear, you know, Roundabout just blasting from this house, or it was Bobby training Tommy how to play the bass, and like, listen, motherfucker, I need a bass player and you need to get good. And for all of that, which may have been seen as an older brother like hammering on his younger brother, he got fucking good. Like, and
He got really good.
you can hear it, and we'll have a link to the Spotify playlist. And John, I'll make you a collaborator so you can add some stuff to it too.
Sure.
We'll link the Spotify like playlist of replacement songs. But even from that first demo that they recorded, that Peter Jesperson heard from them, the Raised in the City demo, which is on Sorry Ma, that you can like literally hear how kind of live and trashy it sounds.
Oh yeah, it's cool. It's great.
It's so fucking good. And Tommy sounds tight as fuck. I mean, look, again, and I know a lot of the story of a band you'll relate to yourself, but I know we both growing up heard tons of demos from our friends.
Very much.
Immediately hearing this demo, even today, like re-listening to that Spotify playlist, I get why Peter like lost his shit and was like, damn, this is good as fuck. Like these guys got it. Like,
yeah, it's really good. It's really good. And it's surprising when you hear it and you're like, I cannot believe, like, it seems, you know, they're doing the punk thing, obviously, because it's right when they start, but they seem fully formed. You know what I mean? Like,
well,
that band that we all know and love now, that's really good, might have not been so great at their instruments yet, or like the songwriting might not be like where it was, say, on Tim, but it's there in a sense. Like that band is there, fully formed. It's pretty incredible.
it is, and it comes in like, I want to say 78, 79 ish is when
Yep.
this happens. Paul's 20. Like I said, he dropped out of school. He's working, and kind of like, it's one of those things like a lot of friends that we had too, who you work, get enough money to buy a guitar, and then you're like, fuck this job, and then get another job because you're like, shit, I need a Marshall amp, or you know, like, and maybe in your case it's like, I need, you know, a better drum set, or a better bass rig.
Yeah.
But it's working because these guys are practicing like literally every day, and that work ethic is paying off. So Peter Jesperson hears the tape, and he's immediately playing it at the record store, and like getting hyped, because like on top of this, Minnesota or Milwaukee or Minneapolis is like, we need our own version of like Apple, like, but here in the Midwest, like a Beatles-esque Midwest version, like,
Okay. Yeah.
like their own setup, which is, again, mirror for me would say be kind of like, not in the same instance, but like in our version of like Grand Rapids and like the Pyramid Schemes, and like the not not Amway, but the venue.
The Van Andel, the Voss, like the Van Andel Arena type thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and their incredible faith-based record label.
Yeah.
Fuck that shit.
I get
But
what you're saying. I get what you're saying. The bar, the Pyramid Scheme bar, and like Jeff Vandenberg and him starting Friction,
yes.
when there wasn't really a label. There was no, as from what I remember, like back then in like the early 2000s. Don Knotts was the first thing he did.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, there really wasn't like a label really representing this, I guess, quote unquote scene. There had been like kid startup labels, like Jan from With Arms Still Empty had Kill You for a Dollar, and Jan, or no, I'm sorry, then Arik from Bounty Hunters had Gimme Records or something, which put out JFK and a couple other things, but none of them really took hold. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I get what you're saying. Like Friction was, Twin Tone and many other labels in the early 80s, independent labels like Alternative Tentacles, Discord, SST, Touch and Go. You can throw Twin Tone in there, Tang in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, all of those labels, and Frontier Records, Slash Records, all those labels were very, very representative of their scenes, and that's what
Yeah.
Twin Tone was. Twin Tone was that label in Minneapolis that I think were the replacements the first thing that was released, or was the label already around? No, it was Suicide Commandos. I think was the first thing, or
Yeah.
one of the first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just trying to look at the Twin Tone. Okay, so the band soon recorded a 4-song demo tape in Mars's basement, which I didn't. We haven't even mentioned Chris Mars, and I
Oh
feel
yeah,
because
Chris.
Chris is fucking amazing drummer, like
Solid,
so
solid as hell.
solid. He's hitting hard as shit. And if you're a Replacements fan and you haven't already, like maybe you're in your infancy, I implore you to watch all of the live performances you can find on YouTube or online anywhere. They're phenomenal. They're so tight, like especially that era of like the early like 81, 82 ish.
Oh
Because
yeah.
they're just so tight. Like you can tell they're playing all the time. So according to the Wikipedia, the band recorded this 4-song demo tape in Mars's basement. Chris Mars, amazing, and handed it to Peter Jesperson in May 1980. Jesperson was the manager of Oak Folk or Folk Jokopus, a
Just
punk
say or records. Yeah, that'll be easier.
or I heard a lot of people say or folk.
Or folk, yeah, that too.
So it was a punk rock record store in Minneapolis. It is since not. I think it evolved. Anyways, also founded Twin Tone Records with Paul Stark. Paul Stark, I heard many times mentioned as like the Spock of the group.
Makes
Interestingly,
sense.
yeah. But you need that because Peter Jesperson is like the element of like hype and excitement, and you need somebody to be more of a realist. Paul Stark was a local recording engineer. And also there was Charlie Halleman. Westerberg originally handed in the tape to see if the band could perform at Jay's Longhorn Bar, a local venue where Jesperson worked as a disc jockey. The band's first performance at a bar was at the Longhorn on July 2nd, 1980. He eavesdropped as Jesperson put in the tape, only to run away as soon as the first song, Raised in the City, played. Again, this is so Midwest. Jesperson played the song again and again and again. If I've ever had a magic moment in my life, it was popping that tape in, said Jesperson. I didn't even get to the first song before I thought my head was going to explode.
I actually was just, while you were reading that, I was trying to look up where Orfolk was.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been not to Orfolk itself, but it closed in 2001, and then it became this place called Treehouse Records.
Oh, right.
And Treehouse is now closed. Treehouse closed in 2017. But yeah, I was at that actual site. So
Really?
I've been in that place, yeah.
Oh,
But
wow.
I didn't know it at the time. Yeah, I've been in that actual place.
Side tangent, because you're my music history guy, so we have to take these avenues while we can. We'll try not to tangent too much.
Sure. Yeah.
If you had to make just off the top of your head a few places in music history you wish you could go see, where would they be?
Holy shit. I've tried to. Well, I really wish I could go to Manchester and check out where the Hacienda used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know when I'm going to get over there again now that I'm having a kid. I mean, that's going to take a little bit of time.
It will, but don't. I want to give you this little bit of advice. since you're new dad and I'm kind of older dad, um, all those things are just going to be even more important. So don't worry, because you'll get the time. I promise you.
Yeah. I mean, we were North Lincoln toured over in the UK twice, and
Mhm.
we played Manchester both times. And every time I was there, I was only in Manchester long enough to see like the venue and like the neighborhood around the venue, and maybe where we stayed that night. Because I remember asking, like, I wanted to go to the Salford Lads Club, which is just outside of Manchester as well. So I'd say the Hacienda Salford Lads Club. And I wasn't close to either of them. Didn't have time, so I'll have to do it again at some other point. Uh, we actually were just in the Joshua Tree.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I saw the picture. I
oh,
loved it.
sorry, my dogs are going crazy.
That's
Um,
okay. It's all good.
but we were actually in Joshua Tree this past weekend, and I got to go see the Welcome to Sky Valley sign, which is the Kai's thing.
Yeah,
So
dude.
that I can check off. That I can check off my list. Um, I'd like to go to Electrical Audio. I'm jealous of some of my friends who've gotten to record there. I really want to go there.
I got some
Um,
good footage while I was there. I did definitely scoured some of the CDs and LPs and talked to quite a few of the employees, and it's cool, man. I if you get a chance to go through Chicago again, I would highly recommend, like, you know,
just stopping in.
just stop in, just say, hey Steve, stop fucking
Yeah.
grumbling about later replacement shit.
Yeah.
Stop
I
fucking
saw it.
pouting.
So I guess the Hacienda, Salford Lads Club, Electrical Audio, the Discord House.
Yeah.
Uh, I want to go there and just kind of poke around, say hi, maybe get a little tour of that. That'd be it's a life goal.
Mhm.
Um, I'm actually uh, I'll say six because I'm actually going to do the next one shortly. I'm going to go up to Aberdeen. I've lived in the Pacific Northwest now for almost 10 years, and I still have yet to drive up to Aberdeen, Washington, which is home of Kurt Cobain and the Melvins and all that fun stuff. But mostly it's filled with Kurt stuff. So I'm going to go up there. That'll get checked off. Uh, where else would I say that I want to go? I've been to the Roxy, I've been to the Rainbow, been to Gilman.
And you've been to
Um,
New York City as well.
Yeah, I've been to New York City. Was in CBGB once. Um, God, there's one more, but I can't really think of it right now. I'll think of it like while we're talking.
That's fine. You
Uh,
just interject, brother.
I think that that'll be best.
It's all good. It's all
I
good. No, I'm glad.
got one more.
I was curious about that. But so initially, in this time, Jesperson called Westerberg the next day asking, so do you want to do a single or an album? And I think he was so guffawed by that, like, what? Like, I thought we were just trying to audition to play a show. Um, with the agreement of Stark and the rest of the band, the replacement signed with Twin Tone Records in 1980. And you kind of mentioned a little bit about Twin Tone earlier.
Yeah,
This was an independent record label based in Minneapolis, which operated from 77 until 1994. It was the original home of influential Minnesota bands, The Replacements and Soul Asylum, and was instrumental in helping the Twin Cities music scene achieve national attention in the 1980s, along with other independent American labels such as SST Records, Touch and Go Records, and Discord. Twin Tone helped to spearhead the nationwide network of underground bands that formed the pre-Nirvana indie rock scene. So I'm trying to see.
basically all the bands that are not popular to the mass culture, but
Mhm.
influenced every single band that's popular to the mass culture.
Yeah,
Those labels are responsible for putting out all of that music.
yeah,
So I will have to say, like, sure, like the Beatles, obviously big cultural turning point moment, and um Nirvana exploding in 91, big cultural shift for music, obviously. But also I would say the rise and the birth of the independent record label in the early 80s is also one of the most culturally significant things that's ever happened to music ever.
I agree. And in my estimation, the
I shouldn't say the birth of independent labels, because there's always been independent labels, but birth of independent punk rock record labels. That is what I'm going to say.
Yeah. No, and I'm with you, dude. I'm totally with you. I will say these things, even as we talk about in reference the Beatles and even now with the replacements in the 80s, these things are still only in their infancy. I mean,
Oh yeah,
as an art form, and it's always so fascinating to wonder what the next movement is going to be. But this specifically, truly, and you nailed it, like this is so important to legions and untold amounts of bands going forward into the future.
oh yeah.
When the band's first album, Sorry Ma, Forgot to Take Out the Trash, was released in August of 1981, it received positive reviews in local fanzines. Now, what is your take on this first release? I know
I love it.
I do too.
I think it's great.
I
It's
think it's
great.
great too.
There's like, because you get they're doing the punk rock thing, because that's what was happening. That was the end, and it was energetic, and it's fucking frantic, which is perfect for like Tommy, who's still 12 years old, 13 years old, or whatever, how old
Yeah,
he was.
13,
13.
13-ish. Yeah.
Okay,
Which
yeah.
is
And
still a
so this,
baby. He's a babby.
oh yeah, and he's like running around, freaking out. But you get that side, but then you also get to see a little bit of what's kind of down the road with, like, Johnny's gonna die, like
Yeah.
that kind of like I think Paul, I think he even said it, may have said it in the book. I don't know. I've read this somewhere. Maybe I'm making it up, or saying something I think, but I think I heard this from Paul. But I think, he wasn't really into the punk thing. He liked the punk thing, but he always wanted to write pop hits. He always
Yes.
wanted to be a pop songwriter, because he loved bubblegum pop music. He loved that shit. But yeah, punk just gave him that vehicle. So like him doing Johnny's Gonna Die Tonight, which, by the way, is about guitarist Johnny Thunders.
Yes.
Um, I think that kind of gave him the ability to be like, oh, I can write this song that's slower and more like melodic and a little darker. But since it's about Johnny Thunders, it'll pass. It'll pass the stuff, because he's punk, right? So that fits. It's like a punk.
Yeah.
It's like a punk. You know, what is that song? The hair metal bands did them all the time. Ballad. It's like a punk
Yeah.
ballad.
Yeah. Well, I think, part of the charm of the band really shows on this album too, because not only are they able to kind of hang with the hardcore punks, but they're able to make fun of them too, because Twin Tone had that notoriety in coming up in the with the music, not only the record store, we'll say, employees, but like the local musicians. And Husker Du and Bob Mould, specifically at the time, are like, well, fuck, we need to get on Twin Tone. But they weren't picked up by Twin Tone. And even on this album, they had the reference to Husker Du with Something to Do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that kind of minor jab to their peers that is cute, but also you don't get the reaction with Bob Mould kind of doing the DIY thing and starting up his own label if it's not for this transitional period for all the bands. It's kind of fascinating in that way, because and look, if you're a fan of these bands, like, that's awesome, really, to know that these guys were peers. And also, like, the way they handled kind of the
They were,
camaraderie and
yeah,
also envy.
they were friendly, but they were competitive too at the same time.
True.
they
which
they
is
totally
healthy.
were.
Which is
Mm-hmm.
healthy, man. It's just like any, like, in a way, like almost like a different sports teams, but of the same, sport.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I feel like, I think about this a lot, and I'm kind of glad that Jesperson told Husker Du no, but
Mhm.
yes to the replacements. I think it makes more sense to me. The replacements, and this is no jab at Husker Du, because I also think that they're like one of my favorite bands too.
True.
But when I think, and I don't know, maybe if it's like label association or what, but I think it's mostly sound. Husker Du to me does not sound. They sound, I guess, Minneapolis if Minneapolis had a sound, but I feel like Replacements just embodies kind of like what Minneapolis feels like and what Midwest feels like more than Husker Du. Like Husker Du is always, since they've been associated with SST, it was just based in California, and they're associated with that hardcore thing and playing really fast and really fucking loud. They they still feel Midwestern, but not as much as the Replacements, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I think the bands like the Sex Pistols and the Ramones had obviously a very prophetic effect on bands like Husker Du and the Replacements, and that,
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of the parts of the book, them mentioning how, like, I think it was Jesperson or somebody was mentioning to Bob Mould, like, do you guys, I mean, do you have to play so fast? And Bob Mould, like, uh this is the slowest we play, man. Like,
Yeah, I know. It's just like I feel like he made the right choice. The Replacements feel more like a twin tone label if you look at the label itself. Whereas Husker Du starting New Alliance, which eventually became part of SST, and Husker Du putting records out on SST, that makes way more sense to me. That
yeah,
makes way more sense. Like I can't picture picking up my copy of Zen Arcade and turning it over and having it say twin tone. It just wouldn't fit.
no, it
So
would,
everything worked out great, I
it
think.
did,
But
it
but
did.
it, you know that little thing did kind of create this like friendly rivalry between the two bands.
Yeah, and it also helps because it doesn't, as a fan of the bands and for music fans specifically, it was kind of nice because it's like, it's like if say you have a bunch of twin tone bands playing a bill, does that does that feel gross? Because it's like, yeah, well, we're just like, all about this one label. Like, having
Yeah,
some variety in a show bill is always warranted and welcome. Like, I don't know about you, but like when I go to a festival, I don't want to just see the same band 10 times. I want to see a variety. You know what I mean?
absolutely not. Yeah,
And so with the
yeah.
Replacements specifically, at this time, they put out Sorry Ma Forgot to Take Out the Trash, and it is critically, like, it is well received, and we mentioned Albini loved this record as well, um and rightfully so. It's a great record. It's a great starting point, as a diehard like Radiohead fan as well. Like, I remember the first time hearing Pablo Honey and thinking like, uh this is great, like, especially in the 90s, and thinking like
Yeah.
the Benz was also like an incredible step up, but at the time, like, it is of that ilk, at least for me, where it's like that first record that, like, you get hints at what's to come, but not a fully fleshed thing quite yet, but everything is starting, firing on
Yeah.
all cylinders.
What do you think of like now that you've lived to see where Radiohead has become or gone, and now they have the smile and all that stuff?
I
What do
love
you
this.
think?
I
What do you
love
think of? Go ahead.
Well, I'm okay. So what do I think
Well, I
of
was going to say Pablo Honey. What do you think of Pablo Honey now? Like
I
looking
think
back, like at it now.
I think that it's an interesting snapshot of the band at the time.
Yeah,
Pablo
and
Honey,
you'd probably put it at the bottom of your
very
list, right?
bottom, very bottom.
Exactly. Same thing you do with Replacements. This Sorry Mom Forgot to Take Up Trash. It's not their. No, actually, I wouldn't put this at the bottom. I take that back. Strike that because strike that. We put Pablo Henny down at the bottom for Radiohead for sure. Maybe King of Limbs would beat it.
It's
King of Limbs
possible.
is pretty big. They're probably interchangeable.
King of Limbs is better live than on recording. I have more
Yeah.
fondness for those songs live than I do on recording. Whereas with this band, I have more fondness for this album live as well. But I also think that the attack of the songs, especially because of the way they were recorded live, I think it
Mm-hmm.
it captures the essence of the band better than, say, something like Pablo Honey did. Even though the songs sound really good, there's
Yeah.
there's there's an attack with this band, and Jesperson and Stark got it. Like Spock and the music nerd like totally had the right idea. They're like, get these guys a little fucking sauced before they perform, but not too sauced.
Yeah.
We don't need a shit show, which is to come. Like we're gonna get into some live antics,
Oh
but
yeah.
like the capture the magic of it, because realistically, the beauty of music as a whole and rock music specifically comes from some of the nuance of the chaos and the mess ups. You need to capture those things, because it's that is gonna portray even more the authenticity. Some of the mocking tone of Bob's guitars and some of the sneer of Paul Westerberg's vocals. He needs to be in that mindset for those songs to work as good as they do.
For sure. For sure. For sure.
Dude, we're gonna get into it so hard one day when we do a Radiohead episode. I can already feel it. But okay, so Sorry Ma comes out. It's well received. The
It's a fun record. It's good. I don't listen to it as much, but
I don't either, but I go back, especially now having access to all of these things. I'm in Trouble was the band's first single, Westerberg's first truly good song, according to him. Sorry Ma included the song Something to Do, an homage to another Minneapolis punk band, Husker Du. The Replacements had a friendly rivalry with the band, which started when Twin Tone chose Replacements. And Husker Du landed an opening slot at a Johnny Thunders gig that the Replacements had wanted.
So there's like, Husker Du gets that gig, the Replacements don't. So there you go. That's where it all starts. But it worked out gloriously for everyone, them and music fans combined, 100%.
Totally.
But if you look at it, it's the funny thing. If you look at it, both bands kind of had the same trajectory, except Husker Du petered out a little too soon. Or you could argue to say that the Replacements did as well, and it slowly just became Paul Westerberg's solo project.
Well,
so, you know what I mean?
And we're gonna get into that when we get to the live releases. But and this is props to you and props to everybody else who's done this. Alcohol is a hell of a drug, man. And it's gonna take its motherfucking toll on this band hard in their 20s, and specifically for poor Tommy Stinson, who, I mean, people have remarked it in documentaries, but this guy is like rock and roll personified as a human being. And without getting into like his after and his struggles with Bob, who, was, as in the book, said to be a Jekyll and Hyde, when he was blackout drunk, or, he was the sweetest person in the world. And then when he was intoxicated, he was, putting fucking Vaseline or vapor rub in people's eyes or doing some crazy bullshit. And we've all been there, man. And we've all had our own struggles. I get it. And for me, it can be too much of a depressant, and I'm glad it's not in my life anymore. But like for them, it was, the first time he drank, it felt like his anxiety went away. And I get that. I
100% agree with that. I got it. I get exactly where he's coming from with that.
Yeah. And for guys who, small talk can be death, but like literally humor is medicine for anyone, anywhere, ever. And like laughing at shit is just the way these guys connected, whether it was in their song titles, in their live performances, in their bond as brothers. Cause a band is a brother, or it's a family, a sisterhood, whatever you want to call it.
It's a marriage. I'd say it's a marriage.
Totally a marriage. And it's one of the most, like, whether you're on a sports team or in a band, it's one of the best ways for you to bond with your fellow human. In my experience, like, we're about to put out a release too, and like my band, and like we couldn't be tighter. You know what I mean? And you've put out things. You're in like what, 3 bands right now? I don't want to. 2. Okay. We'll have to mention that before we end, because I want you to get get your props out there for that. Okay, so I want to also paint the picture in the 80s and 1980 and 81. Paul wrote like a motherfucker. Like he wrote like 50 songs, and 18 of them end up on Sorry Ma. And if I had to say there was one issue with Sorry Ma, it's probably that they could have trimmed a little of the fat.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's too many songs on that record for sure, and they're not all winners.
Right. They're good, but
Yeah,
it's that same thing I said earlier where Paul's just writing, and
yeah,
maybe Peter was a little too hyped and wanted to beat out another band called Wire when
yeah.
it came to tracks. But anyway, sometime in late 81, the Replacements played a song called Kids Don't Follow. Jesperson was convinced, like, fuck, we got to put this out, and pleaded with Twin Tone co-owners Peter Stark and Holman, I will do anything, or Paul Stark, I will do anything to get this out. I will hand stamp jackets if I have to. The partners agreed to fund the recording, but Jesperson and virtually everyone he knew had to hand stamp 10,000 white record jackets. Now, anybody in bands who knows what that process is like,
It's horrible.
fucking arm already hurts hearing that.
Yeah, I think that song "Kids Don't Follow" is one of their best songs ever of all time. It's fucking
Well,
amazing. And I used to have an original press of that record. I used to have an original
holy
press of that record,
shit.
and I sold it. I sold it a long time ago. But I used to have it. I'm bummed that I don't have it anymore. And now it was one of those things that, like, I found. I want to say I found it on tour or something. I can't remember. It was a long time ago.
Wow.
Um, but
Stinky.
I found, yeah, I found it on tour, and it was before Discogs or anything like that. So it was priced pretty reasonably at the time. I think it was like, I want to say it was like $50 or $80, something like that. Um,
That's
which was a lot for that then. But now I think you can't find an original. I think the originals are pretty expensive now. But anyway, I digress. I love this EP. I think it's fantastic. It's where you start to get stuff that's eventually going to make us, I don't know. The Go is such a great song.
that's
Dope Smoke and Moron is the fucking shit. That's like one of my favorite hardcore songs
well, let's talk
ever.
a little bit about the EP. So it was the Replacement Stink, Kids Don't Follow, +7. You got Fuck School, which I mean they all
Fucking
said that.
great. Fucking amazing.
But and I hinted at it earlier. If anybody if anybody was listening to Go and saying it's time to start a band, it was it was the Pixies. I mean, Go is one of my favorite Replacement songs, but every time I listen to it, I hear Surfer Rosa.
Yeah, it sounds like, the Pixies were obviously really into Husker Du, and I'm assuming the replacements. I'm assuming the replacements were one of them,
Oh yeah,
and definitely you can hear a little bit of Go in what the Pixies would eventually end up doing with that whole quiet, loud uh, thing. But the Pixies would take that quiet, loud thing to a whole nother level, which would inspire another band to take it to another. You know what I mean?
totally.
But yeah, you can definitely hear it in Go. That
Yeah,
song is great.
it is great, and it's part of that is in Paul's delivery and his singing.
Mhm.
Um, that that performance and even in subsequent like Kids Don't Follow, uh, the that which also starts with a Minneapolis police breaking up a breaking up a show, which like it this is a band that I just love the little background noises you hear in the recordings, like whether it's the recording engineer like okay go or whatever, or
Yeah, yeah,
or in the next release, which we're about to get into, Hootenanny, when you can hear which I love the first song Hootenanny just because
oh,
the story
I hate
behind it.
it so much. I hate it so much. I hate it.
I
I,
get it.
I
I
I
get
mean,
it.
I get the story behind it, and it's funny, but good Lord, I hate that song.
I completely understand. And you know what? A room full of punks hated it too.
But
But
I was gonna say, on, I don't know if you're going to say this. You might be on your way to saying this, but
No,
in the
go ahead.
beginning of Kids Don't Follow, you know, the guy comes in, this is the Minneapolis police,
Mhm.
time to go. You hear a guy in the background yell, "Hey, fuck you, man." Do you know who that is? Do you know who that is? That's
I
David Perner of Soul Asylum, the lead singer
Yeah,
of Soul Asylum.
yeah. No, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I might have forgotten to mention that. That's definitely like that's so fucking awesome. Um,
Yeah, because Soul Asylum was, I want to say it was Bob Mould was working with Soul Asylum early on. I
mhm.
think that's right.
And
But
obviously they
they
go
kind
on
of sounded like, yeah, they kind of sounded like the Replacements. The Soul Asylum did, you know. And
totally.
so did a little band out of Buffalo called the Goo Goo Dolls. When the Goo Goo Dolls started, they sounded like they wanted to be a mix of the Replacements and the Descendants, and eventually became more Replacement sounding.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I don't know. Sidebar: Goo Goo Dolls, Superstar Car Wash, A Boy Named Goo, and a few songs off of Dizzy Up the Girl, and I'll even throw in the one before Superstar Car Wash, which I can't remember the name of. Those records are all great.
Yeah, with you.
They literally are all just replacements. They're just, the Goo Goo Dolls were replacements junior. That's what they
Mm.
were known as. Literally known as that, like in the underground. People are like, oh, replacements junior. Anyway, that's the sidebar. I love Soul Asylum and I love the Goo Goo Dolls for that reason alone. Is that they're both so influenced by the replacements to the point that they wanted to be that band.
Totally. And
Yeah.
I loved A Boy Named Goo. I had that was one of those Columbia purchases or get 10 CDs for a nickel eras that
Oh yeah.
I totally like ate that album up. And I remember distinctly being mocked by like hardcore fans for like having that in my CD wallet, if you will.
It's
Uh,
such a good record. I don't care what anybody says. Anybody that's like some punk dude or
Elitist
whatever.
fuck. Some
Some,
Steve
yeah.
Albini head. Um,
They're such great songs. Anyway,
and I love Steve Albini. Don't get me wrong. There's
yeah.
fucking amazing music from that man, and his contribution is fucking priceless.
He's
But
he's wrong sometimes. It's okay to admit it. And
it's
the thing is like if people think that they can't tell Steve Albini he's wrong to his face, you're stupid. You probably could, because he's going to do the same thing to you, and he'll respect you more for standing up for what you believe in, just like he does. So
just words of
he's wrong
wisdom.
there.
Words of
He's
wisdom
wrong
from
there.
words of wisdom from Musicdad, folks. So with a batch of new songs, the replacements entered a warehouse in Roseville, Minnesota, to record their next album with twin tone co-owner Stark Engineering. Westerberg wrote songs in stops and starts, so it took several sessions of recording to finish the album. Stark's meticulous approach to recording contrasted with that of replacements, often frustrating the band. In one session, Mars and Westerberg switched instruments and they began to improvise, with Westerberg repeatedly shouting, "It's a hootenanny." The band
God, I hate that song.
the band then declared it to be side one, track one of the new album. According to Stark, the recording was a complete joke from their point of view. They did not care what they delivered. Hootenanny, the band's second studio album, was released in April 1983. Hootenanny saw Westerberg expand his songwriting capabilities in songs such as Willpower. This is one of my favorites of this album, with echoed vocals and a sparse arrangement, and Within Your Reach, which features
Yeah, I love
Westerberg,
that song. I
yeah,
love that song.
which features Westerberg on all instruments. He revealed a more sensitive side. It was a more mature album than Stink and Sorry Ma Forgot to Take Out the Trash. Hootenanny was played on over 200 radio stations across the country, with critics acclaiming the album. Robert Chista, writing in the Village Voice, deemed it the most critically independent album of 1983.
Yeah, dude, Treatment Bound is such a killer jam. So is Color Me Impressed.
Yep, Color
Um,
Me Impressed is like a staple for them
I
too.
like Love Lines too. Love Lines is great.
Yeah.
Uh, Within Your Reach, we just mentioned. But yeah, the funny thing about this record is
Mm-hmm.
I really honestly think that this and Sorry Ma are the two I listened to and All Shook Down. I listened to the least, those
Mm-hmm.
three. And I don't know why. I think the reason why I don't listen to Hootenanny a lot is because I fucking hate the front cover of it so much. and I also hate the first song.
It
It's
looks
the
like
worst.
Hairspray. It looks like John
It's
Waters, like a like a,
yeah,
a movie poster. Like it really throws me off, or like a Pee-wee's Big Adventure, like
yeah. It's
TV
such a
screen or something. Like it quiche.
it's very 50s, very bubblegum you know, variety show looking,
Right.
from the 50s.
And where
It's terrible.
Sorry Ma has this like it almost looks like your typical late 70s, early 80s like punk
Punk
rock
rocker.
cover, which I can get, which I guess similarly I can stomach that more than something like Hootenanny where it just looks like, oh come on. Um,
Yeah,
but the
terrible
music
cover.
is still great. Like
Yeah.
I don't think we're either of us are saying that we don't like this album. Like I will say hands down, there are no albums by this band I despise at all, or that I say it's good, it's passable. Like there are like, as a Replacements fan, I feel like there are good things to be found on every single one of their releases. Um,
For
Hootenanny,
sure.
Hootenanny, obviously is it continues their processing of what they're going to become. Bob is at the time he's still very much in the throes of his addiction. Tommy essentially has to kind of cope with the fact that like his brother's kind of a shit show. Paul really becomes in some ways kind of like the older brother he needs, and that like he's showing so much drive in writing the music.
Hmm.
He's Peter Jesperson, essentially because they're touring and he's still a teenage boy, has to be signed over as guardian while they're touring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I think this is obviously, like you were saying, you're going, I think you're going to this, or you just said it, but yeah, this is definitely the record where the rift between the rest of the band and Bob starts.
yes.
This is where it starts, and it starts specifically with the song "Within Your Reach."
Mm-hmm.
Bob hated that fucking song. He
Yeah.
hates. I think he hates a majority of Paul's slower songs. Like, I don't think he was even a really big fan of Go. I don't think he wanted to do that. Maybe he did. I don't know. Um, I don't think. I think it was like that one still was kind of rock and roll. But once we got to Within Your Reach, that this is where the beginning of that rift starts for sure.
Yes. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I mean it's tricky because Bob is a complicated figure, mostly because like it's strange to me, but I get it with somebody in the throes of an addiction, but like being such a classic Yes fan and having his brother play bass in the caliber of say a punk rock Chris Squire on bass in his
Mm-hmm.
band is it with songs like Go, I would have just been proud to have things expanding rather than just being a one note band in a punk rock forum or hardcore forum at the time in the Midwest.
Yeah.
But it takes this unexpectedly divided turn with what is to come next, and probably the first, I will say, of their 10 out of 10 A plus catalog, which is with Let It Be. Um, when
Just an incredible record.
I look, if you're looking for more things to be said about a classic album, I guess from my perspective, this is in some ways where college radio is born, and where
Mm, I'd
it
say REM is more of that.
you're
Where
right,
like
you're right.
REM. Well, no, like college radio was playing everything. So like Black Flag was getting played on college radio, like all that shit. But yeah, REM or college rock, quote unquote college rock.
Yes.
That's kind of like the REM B-52s, a lot of that Athens scene. But then also you can put in the Replacements in there, because this, the Replacements before Hootenanny and Let It Be, like I think Within Your Reach got a lot of college college radio play, like a lot of and it was on the fucking it was on the Say Anything soundtrack, but that was a few years later. It was on the soundtrack in '89, but it was a very played song on college radio. Within Your Reach was, which eventually, when Let It Be came out, I mean, that thing is just full of college radio hits. I
True.
Will Dare, Favorite Thing, Unsatisfied, 16
Oof.
Blue,
Mhm.
Androgynous. I mean, the whole record is like,
Front to back
even
bangers.
even yeah, even the two stupid songs, Gary's Got a Boner and Tommy Gets His Tonsils Out, even those two stupid songs are still kind of cool.
Yeah.
And their cover of Kiss's Black Diamond is the shit.
Yeah.
I mean, and then it ends with answer. I know we haven't even started talking about the record yet, and I'm already going into it.
No, I love it,
Um,
dude. This is what the episode is all about.
but like Answering Machine ending with that song is just like fucking incredible. Like that song is like when you when you figure out what it's about. Excuse me. When you figure out what it's about, it's about Paul, who is dating this girl long distance, who I believe is in Michigan, if I'm not
Ann
mistaken,
Arbor.
Ann Arbor.
She was a journalist. She had either that or like journalistic aspirations of some sort. I think
Yeah,
he was like a meet and let's not beat around the bush. Paul Westerberg is a fucking stud of epic proportions at the time. I mean, you can write songs like Answering Machine. You're basically Zac Efron at that point, and he's getting a lot of attention from the female persuasion, and that's part of what I think specifically was the difference between, say, the Replacements and Husker Du. Like, Husker's about the music, whereas the Replacements are like, where's the fucking girls, brother?
or the
Like,
party. Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
or
dude,
the party.
yeah, but like that song, Answering Machine, is so great because it's about him trying to call that lady and
Mhm.
getting her answering machine all the time because they're living this long distance relationship. And when you're like, you know, a kid, and this is before cell phones, and when I was a teenager, and you really like someone, and you're like calling them, and you're getting the answering machine, and like you don't want to leave them. I mean, it's such a good song about like longing and want and wanting to talk to someone and like connection and love
Totally.
and all that stupid shit you feel
That
when
we
you're a
mock, but
kid.
also adore at the same in the
Yeah, but
same
it's
breath.
like it's stuff that you want when you're a kid. It's this fantastic song.
Totally. And it speaks to also the simplicity of writing about what you know, and
Yeah.
how that immediately breeds authenticity and connection to the listeners.
Mhm.
You know,
And
the
it's a
people.
great. It was such a great way to end a record too. Anyway,
Totally. And it also speaks to Westerberg writing so much and giving it to Jesperson and being like, dude, I got this song. And he's like, hey man, we'll go in there before everyone else is, and it'll be just me and you, and I'll tap record and you just do your thing. All right, man. We'll
yeah.
we'll make a couple of those. And that's gonna keep going. But Let It Be is phenomenal.
Also features Peter Buck from REM
I was
on
just about
mandolin
I was
on
just I will
Favorite
follow.
Thing. I will follow Dan.
No, you're good. So the new material placed more of a focus on songwriting, and the music was influenced by heavy metal, arena rock, and Chicago blues. Instruments such as piano, 12-string guitar, and mandolin were featured throughout the album. The new album includes songs such as I Will Dare, which featured Peter Buck playing lead guitar from REM. And we should mention REM was like such a great it was a benefit, especially for the Replacements, because it gave him something to shoot for, because obviously they were just like, I don't want to say anything bad about REM because I love them, but like at the time it was kind of like such an interesting juxtaposition to the Replacements, kind of booze filled, like fuck it all,
For
let's do
sure.
it.
For
But
sure.
REM
Because
was
REM was
diligent.
such, yeah, they were like the clean. Sorry, I got this thing in my chair going on.
No, you're
Apologize.
good.
Um, damn, this mat sucks.
You're good, man. Get
But
comfy, fix it, whatever you got to do.
yeah, I do need to get something to drink too. You mind if I go
Right.
grab something? I'll be
Yeah,
right back.
go ahead. I'll start going through some of the behind the scenes ish stuff here. Yeah, take your time. So I mentioned I mentioned some of the stuff. The new material placed more of focus on songwriting. They had a bunch of variety of influences. REM was diligent. They were go-getters. They were out there. REM was prolific and focused, whereas the replacements were
We're
very
not.
much
We're not.
not.
They're not. They were like, I'm sorry for all that. Apologize. But
No, you're good.
REM was like the very serious band, like with
Yeah.
the serious music, and we're very like they were very clean. They were like they definitely embodied that whole like new wave thing. You know what I mean? Like when punk happened, punk was kind of a dirty word, so they wanted to have new wave. And I feel like REM was like very they fit that bill so well. And they
Mhm.
were the very clean version of like alternative rock or what became college rock. And the replacements were such the antithesis of that, which, it's funny that Peter Buck landed on the record, but in a way it's not, because him and Michael Stipe were both huge fans of this band, like loved them, and
Mhm.
actually took them out on tour. And when they were on that tour, they got kicked off that tour. The replacements did, because they were too much of a fucking mess. First, I think this is not the first thing that they do that's like shooting yourself in the foot, but
Oh
it's
no,
one
we'll
of
get into
many.
SNL and
It's
all
one
the
of many.
tomfoolery that ensues here, because this is an incredible time for the band, though. I mean, they get such critical acclaim from Let It Be. It's released October 1984. I mentioned Robert Chista. He gave this album an A+, and the Seattle Rocket critic Bruce Pavitt called Let It Be, quote, a mature, diverse rock that could well shoot these regional boys into the national mainstream, and god damn it, it did.
Do you know who Bruce Pavitt is?
I do not off the see,
He's
would
the co-owner of Sub Pop.
oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
hey,
he used to write for the Seattle Rocket as well. And then I think this was obviously before he started Sub Pop, but yeah, it's kind of cool, right?
yeah, no,
Just
that's
little things
awesome.
like that.
Small
But
world.
like none of them are wrong. Like I, Robert Christow's review is an A+. It's perfectly correct.
Mhm.
Everything that this, if you've never heard the record, if anybody's listening to this podcast or watching it, God forbid you're watching it, because I can't believe you want to see what either of us look like.
Hey, we're
But
some
if you're
handsome
listening,
devils.
but if you're listening to this or watching it, if you haven't heard that record, stop what you're doing, stop listening to this and listen to it, because it's truly one of the best records, rock and roll records, probably ever made.
True. It's it very much so is one of the greatest albums of the 80s, but also it's an experience, man. It's one that you can come back to multiple times. You mentioned how it reminds you of a time. It's one of those records, much like any of the classic albums of the era and subsequently before or after that really speaks to a time and a place, and
Oh man,
but it is also timeless in its scope, like as far as like the songwriting, the playing, the the vibe of it. This is and we'll get into mixes too, because
mm-hmm.
in future albums, especially with like Tim, um it's funny because I don't know if I necessarily want a new mix of something like this. I feel like this
We
one's
don't need this one. Doesn't need a new mix. This one's all it really needs is like maybe a remastering job,
mm-hmm,
um, just to make it louder.
mm-hmm,
That's all I would do. The mix on it is great.
mm-hmm,
It's still very, it's still kind of filled with a few '80s tropes
mm-hmm,
from that time, but they're not nearly as offensive of what would be we'd be given later on Tim or
mm-hmm.
any of the records that follow Tim. Like to me, I find some of those recordings just fucking terrible, but the songwriting is great, so it saves the record and you're able to look past it. Let It Be does not have any of that. Let It Be is it's a perfect mix. That's why I think when they do the next record, which we're going to get into,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's why when they put that record out, when they put Tim out, the follow up, and people heard the mixes, they were like, why would you make your band sound worse? Because it sounds like shit. Like you know, before we get into time, I'll say something about Let It Be. Let It Be to me reminds me of the again, this band is very one of my favorites, so I listen to them a lot. So I tie them to a lot of like memories and like times. And this one is definitely like late '90s, early 2000s, like first first love, kind of like living out of my parents' house and on my own for the first time. This is the record. This record and Sunny Day Real Estate's Diary and the Weaker Than's first record and Drop Dead and the Locust first record and Colette, like all of that stuff is like, and the Replacements Let It Be are all my early, like 20 years old. It's exactly where I am. Whenever I put this on and I hear Unsatisfied, boom, taken right back there. Such a great song.
Dude, Unsatisfied is maybe in my top 10 Replacement songs. It's hard because they move around quite a bit. That guitar tone and melody structure is so key to how I write too. And vocally, like Westerberg has stated some things about certain songs, and I remember Bob even saying something like, yeah, if we'd had like maybe 10 more goes around with that song, it would have been a better song. But it's like, no, you got it, you nailed it.
Yeah, they pretty much nailed it. They knocked it out of the park right with that one. I mean, that and 16 Blue are like the centerpieces of this record, I think.
I think 16 Blue is fundamentally so important too to the band because that's Paul writing to Tommy.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I was listening to it today because you sent that playlist over, and so I was listening to it while I was raking leaves in the backyard. It's such an adult thing to do, you know, at 40 years old in a house you own, you know, it's just fucking wild. And so I'm listening to a song that
Props.
like, yeah, thanks. Yeah. So you know, you're listening to this song that you heard when you were a teenager, but you're in your 40s, your early 40s now, and you're listening to the lyrics and you're like, man, he's so right. Being 16 and like a teenager is fucking hard. This shit sucked. It sucks.
You're in a perpetual pause mode because you're too young, you're too young to really do anything adult, and you're too old to necessarily be like, well, you know, like mom and dad aren't going to clean this mess. Maybe they are going to clean up the mess for you if you're some spoiled rich kid, but like in the Midwest with like real, you got to get a job. You got decisions to start to make. You got to start to build some sort of confidence if you're ever going to get a girlfriend. You have to like,
it's like there's a line in that chorus where he says, your age is the hardest age. Everything just drags and drags. It's like, yeah, dude, when you're 16 years old, like, you're right. You have to work this fucking job that pays shit. You're still living with mom and dad, but yet you feel like an adult. But you know, looking at it now as a 42, 3-year-old man, you can look back at your age at 16 and be like, you're a fucking idiot. You were a child. But at that time, you just like, you want to get out of like, you want to get away from your parents. Like, I didn't want to be at home. I wanted to be out with my friends or like going to shows or like playing music in the basement. You know, you want to do those things, right?
Exactly.
And that song just nails it. But you can't drink, you can't party. I mean, you can, but if you're a nerd, you can. See, that's the thing. It's like, what's funny is I did not do that shit. I didn't start really partying until I got out of my parents' house. When I was in my parents' house, I didn't really drink because I felt, you know, I didn't want to get caught. I was a pretty nerdy kid.
Oh, I
wasn't cool, and I wasn't going to parties. And when I did go to parties, I didn't feel like drinking because, like, it's not that I was straight edge or anything. I just didn't want to do it. It just wasn't my thing. It wasn't until, I guess I was about 16, 17. But every summer I'd go downtown with my friends and drink beer. But it's just like 16 sucks, and that song just nails it. Well,
anyway. No, I'm glad you mentioned all this stuff because I relate to that song specifically too when I think back of that time. But with with that album. They got rave reviews. Spin Magazine's made ranked number 12 on Spin Magazine's list of 25 greatest albums of all time, and number 15 on Rolling Stone Magazine's list of the 100 greatest albums of the 1980s. Let It Be attracted the attention of major record labels, and by late 1984, several had expressed an interest in signing the replacements. Financially, the band was not doing well. They were not selling enough records to recoup the expenses, and money from shows went to recording costs, hotels, travel, food, and instrument repairs. Bob Stinson worked a day job as a pizza chef. Twin Tone was, and he was like the only one working a job. Twin Tone was not being paid reliably by distributors, and the sales of Let It Be were not high enough to justify extra promotion. Quote, it was time for a major label to take over, according to the label's co-owner Stark. The band was close to a major label contract, but often alienated label representatives by intentionally performing badly in concert. Their 19
shooting themselves in the foot constantly, like
literally.
They have so many chances to do so many great things, and they just like, this is the band, like the hard luck band, but not even hard luck because it was just like shitty luck. They're fucking idiots.
Yeah.
But awesome, I don't know. Anyway.
But the story of this band is the lovable losers. And
100%. That's like the most accurate thing you could say.
it's this thing too, though, but because in retrospect, looking back on it, it is also similarly the case of like, oh, of course they did that, like playing a show to a group of punk rockers and being like, you know what, let's play Hootenanny and fucking let's play a bunch of like old country covers, or I have seen the Knights of Jesus, like all these old fucking, and just getting shitty as fuck drunk and like letting people shout out cover ideas, only knowing like, okay, this is an A and a G, and we're just going to bounce back and forth on this. All I know how to sing is I Am Iron Man, and we're just going to cover Black, we're just going to cover this fucking song we like. But there were influences specifically that were coming from Jesperson, who would let them comb through his records, and those things were taking hold. One of the big ones being a band that some would say is underrated and some would say is overrated, being Big Star.
Who says it's overrated? Who would say it's overrated?
There's dude, in this time and age with the internet, you see some stuff that you're like, come on, or you go on Reddit and you want to renounce your humanity, but like there are people that have shit takes, but hey, it's okay.
I was gonna say Big Star is
amazing,
one of the best things, and I'm glad Paul discovered it.
I'm glad Paul discovered it. I'm also glad Wilco discovered it. I'm glad a lot of bands discovered it. Their 1985, speaking of the Replacements live album, The Shit Hits the Fan, was an example of their concert performances at the time. There are a lot of bands who, and I'm just going to sandwich this one, they had a particularly important show where they played for, we'll say, media or record label, major label record guys.
Execs,
yeah. Where they would go out of their way to play shittily and have their roadie sing, or in the instance of when they played in Oklahoma City to 30 people in a 1,200 people venue, and those 30 people, the Flaming Lips was there and had a profound impact on them, whether it be playing against the crowd. They never had a set list. A lot of times it was based on feel, and I can respect the fuck out of that. It's to me, it reminds me, and because I'm a huge fan of comedy as well, it reminds me of the way that say a comedian operates with hecklers, and I can respect it in that you don't let them get the upper hand, if that makes any sense.
100%. The only other band, on the side note with the set list thing, the only other band that I know of for certain that never wrote set lists was Fugazi.
Yes. future
And that
episode.
was that's pretty amazing. And seeing it in person is something else. It's it's otherworldly. It rearranged my brain. It fucked my life up. Anyway,
No, that's
um,
good. But this is, I also want to mention any of these bands that we mentioned during this time, whether it's Husker Du, fuck, even the Faces, these are all bands you should check out. Like, seriously, people, like if they were an influence on the Replacements, chances are they're a band that will change your life.
yeah, those early Faces records are great. I mean, even the later ones, just the Faces are great. Even when they were called the Small Faces, they were great. They're just great.
Rod Stewart is an incredible frontman. So
Mm-hmm.
one label, the Warner Brothers record subsidiary, Sire Records, eventually signed the Replacements.
Yeah, they did it. Seymour Stein,
Seymour
who's
Stein.
also a complete, a complete fucking wasteoid himself. Seriously, I have his autobiography and I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
I need to because he just recently died this year. I want
Uh,
to say it was this year or last year. I feel like it was this year. But you know, the man responsible for signing Madonna, the Replacements, and or not, I'm sorry, Madonna, the Ramones, the Talking Heads, the Dead Boys, but the Smiths on his label. You know, you guys did a pretty good job of things. Jesus and Mary Chain,
oh,
fucking Ministry. There's so much shit on Sire. Anyway,
so
yes,
good.
he was a wasteoid. He saw them. He saw the Replacements. I'm pretty sure you're gonna say this. He saw the Replacements when he was super hammered, and he fucking loved it.
Totally. Totally. And so did Alex Chilton. Uh,
Yep.
so he is a producer for their first major label album. Tim. Here we go.
Oh man,
Tim.
I love this record.
This
Again,
is
as I said at the start of this episode, will forever. It's the first Replacements record that I bought,
mhm.
and it will forever remind me of being 16 years old, like permanently etched in my skull. Driving around in my 1984 Delta 88,
There you go.
100% with my shitty Pioneer CD player that I got installed at Best Buy or some shit like that. Oh man,
Oh yeah, I
yeah.
did the same.
And I remember like you know what I got it. I remember I listened to it. I have a vivid memory of this. I have a vivid memory of listening to it, driving to get food, and then coming back. This is like a year or so after I've had the record,
Mm-hmm.
or whenever, but driving back from somewhere on Plainfield with food. I want to say we were coming back from Vitale's on Leonard down Plainfield with food to go to her parents' house to watch the final episode of Seinfeld the night that it aired. Why do I remember that? Oh, because of this record.
Totally. Yeah, no,
Mm-hmm.
I that's awesome. Yeah, it's released October 1985. Um, this is a big album. I would say this is probably, and look, I have a top three albums of this band, and this is always in there. It also moves around to whether or not it's my favorite. And I think really the reason it's moved specifically probably closer to my number one spot is because of the Ed Statham
Oh
mixes
yeah,
in this
it's
release that's came.
it it fixed that record. Like most, I would not. I don't really think a lot of records benefit from remixes, remasters for sure, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of records really do not benefit from a remix most of the time. This record, it's like night and day. It's like
Yes.
what it did to that record. It's crazy. The original mix obviously has the tropes of 80s engineering and production with the big gated snare drum, so it sounds very 80s, very tinny. It sounds very thin. This new mix, you can actually hear the low end. You can hear Tommy playing bass, and some of his bass parts are fucking insane.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's different guitar things that I've never noticed before. They're really cool. They make Little Mascara a little longer on the new mix.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it just sounds better. It sounds thicker. It sounds like them. It sounds like the record that should have followed up. Um,
Let It Be.
Let It Be.
Which
100%.
I want to mention for Let It Be. they I think like they like most guys, they're like, yeah, we'll just call this album Dog Come, but they couldn't come up with a name to save their lives. And literally one of them were in the van and we're like, we'll just name it after the first song we hear on the radio. And Jesperson like clenches his ass and turns the radio on, and there's the Beatles iconic Let It Be on the radio, and that's what they
Yep,
voted. That's what they went with. And also the album art for that album is iconic because it's just the four of them on the roof of the house that they had band practice in,
yeah,
which nothing solidifies and becomes more iconic than that image of, at least for me, like when I think of the Replacements, I see that image in my head too.
for sure. That's the
Um,
picture that you've picture of that band
totally.
easily.
Like it's essentially like the classic art version of the Replacements. I was thinking, I had the weirdest thought today. I was like, the Replacements, if it was a horror movie franchise, would be like Evil Dead, like as iconic. I don't know why I thought of that, but that was just like the weird path my brain,
Why Evil Dead?
because it's like long lasting, timeless. It's almost like made its own genre in a weird way, but like also
Yeah, yeah. I
doesn't
get what you're saying.
doesn't doesn't detract from say other things.
Yeah,
But Tim is the fourth studio album by American alternative rock band The Replacements. It has bangers front to back. Again, 10 out of 10, A+ album.
yeah.
You've got Can't
Cannot
Hardly
go wrong
Wait.
with this.
You've got Can't Hardly Wait on this album as a added bonus on the Ed Statham with the electric version, which I think you specifically were highlighting, at least in social media world. But like I agree.
Yeah,
Like this
there's a
version
few
is.
different versions. There's a few different versions on this new one. There's
Mhm,
the electric one with the kind of like rougher, different vocal
mhm.
approach. And then there's one with cello, and then there's one with acoustic, and then there's like a demo, and then there's one that's it came out on this collection that came out in the 90s called All for Nothing, Nothing for All.
Mhm.
And on that collection it was called the Tim version.
Mhm.
Um I can't remember what order it is on the new mix release, but that version, the Can't Hardly Wait Tim version, is insane. Like I
Yes.
heard the one that you put on the playlist
Mhm.
is one of the versions, but it's not that version. That version is crazy good. The
Yeah.
Tim version is crazy good, which also, again, going in line with the lovable loser tag, or the most fucking cursed band in the world. They recorded this version of Can't Hardly Wait, the Tim version, and it was going to be the initial single from the record,
Yeah.
but they decided not to put it on the record because I think Paul Westerberg didn't think it was right and he wasn't happy with it yet.
Mhm.
Had they come out with this mix and the Tim version on the record back then, they would have been the biggest band in
Ever.
just huge. They would have been
Yeah.
huge because that song is so good, and it would have been
Mhm.
a hit. It just would have been a hit, but they
I
didn't put it
mean,
on the record. And
it's a good enough
whatever.
song to launch an entire to launch what some may consider an iconic 90s um romantic teen film, if you will.
Yeah, can't
Can't
hardly
hardly
wait.
wait. But yeah, it's that good. It has that, it has multiple versions and every version is valid because the songwriting is so good. But with
100%.
him, you also get another 10 out of 10, and this will lead into the SNL performance as well. With one of, like, I get chills when I think of this song because it is Bastards of Young. It is
Mm-hmm.
maybe one of the greatest rock songs ever.
No,
And
I'd put it up there for sure.
it is, so I'm going to try not to get emotional here.
Uh-huh.
This lyrically as a song is like in the Mount Rushmore of lyrics for me, specifically with this verse. And I'm going to read from the lyrics here. The ones who love us best are the ones we'll lay to rest and visit their graves on holidays at best. The ones who love us least are the ones we'll die to please. If it's any consolation, I don't begin to understand them.
Yeah.
That shit is so fucking deep and resonates with 16-year-old Ryan to 41-year-old Ryan in the same same feel, but even
Yeah.
more so now than I can even extrapolate and expand on and explain.
Mm-hmm.
That song is so I'm this is again speaking to the Midwestness of us and in this band. I'm so fucking proud of this band for achieving that type of a song.
Yeah.
And
They nailed it. And I don't know about you, but for years until this new mix came out, I thought he was saying, "We are the sons of no one,"
mhm,
but it's not. It's "Wait on the sons of no one."
mhm,
I thought it was "We are" for the longest time, and now I can, in the new mix you can actually hear him say "Wait on the sons." I'm
mhm.
like, oh man, that makes the song so much better.
Totally. Well, that's also and not to discredit what you thought the version was, is because I'm sure there's a recorded version where he said it the other way too. Because
Yeah.
this isn't a guy that likes to do multiple takes the same way.
Hmm.
These guys like us get bored as shit when they have to play the same thing twice.
Oh,
So
for sure. But I would say too, for this song, I do love this song, but it's not my favorite song on the record.
I get you, dude. I
Yeah,
there are
mine.
Go
Oh, go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, no,
Okay.
you were gonna say your favorite. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I would say my favorite on the record is "Left of the Dial,"
Oh,
hands
totally.
down. That's that and "Little Mascara." Those are tied.
And I will admit too, Bastards of Young, as much praise as I just threw on it, Swingin' Party is my favorite.
That's a great one too.
I mean, Swingin' Party is I it just means more.
Hmm.
But that's like calling for me. This record is, again, like I said, front to back bangers. Swingin' Party speaks to a vibe that I adore in music that comes through in, again, in lyrics and in performance. But
Hmm.
this is also, and we hinted at it too, a big division point for Bob and the rest of the band.
This is the this is kind of this is the last straw. Like I bought the new mix and there's a huge booklet in there, right? And so I read the booklet and um Tommy Ramone, who recorded the record along with Ed Statesum, uh
Mm-hmm.
said that he maybe saw Bob the entire summer that he was there with the band working on the record, he saw Bob like three times.
Yeah.
And Bob barely played on the record. When he did play on the record, he just kind of came in. He was either wasted or didn't give a fuck and just kind of played whatever over the music. And they just kind of pick and chose the best bits that would fit into whatever song, you know? And Bob, to like your point you said earlier, Bob was still working a job when they put out Let It Be and they started doing really well. Bob still was working the job when they signed to a major label. He didn't have to work the job, but he was so checked out with being in that band that he just kept his job. He was just he never fully believed anything that he was going to do was going to succeed. So he was like he never quit his job
Mm.
ever. Because even though his friends were like, dude, you're on a major label now, you're in a band that's like gonna, eventually, we'll get to it. They'll be on SNL. Like you're gonna be on TV. You're gonna be selling. You're gonna be touring all the time. You can't have a job. And he would still keep a job. But yeah, I think
It,
this
it,
is the last record Bob is even remotely on, and he's barely on it.
yeah. Well, and he's checked out, like you said. He And it's not because he doesn't love the band. I mean, it's a heartbreaking process when somebody quits a band or you have to fire a band member. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the and like you said, it's like a family, and when they had to make this decision, it was hard on them. But the band spent the remainder of 1985 after the release, and the first half of 1986 touring behind Tim. In mid-January 1986, the Replacements received a last-minute request to appear as the musical guest on the edition of January 18th of Saturday Night Live, replacing the scheduled act, the Pointer Sisters.
Hell yeah.
The invitation was partly thanks to the show's musical director at the time, G.E. Smith, who was a Replacements fan,
That's
which
great.
is great.
Yeah.
However, as a result of their shambolic and profanity-laced performance, which I mean, all that happens is during Bastards of Young, Westerberg is really just trying to make sure Bob gets into his solo on time, and off mic says, like, "Come on, fucker." Um,
Yeah.
you can't hear it in the recording. I've seen the SNL performance recording. You can't hear it. You can see him mouthing it, but like the only people that heard it were up in the booth just because they're running sound. And, fucking Dr. Evil is like, oh God. Like he loses his fucking cool completely on a
Yeah.
season of SNL that sucked dick to begin with. I mean, like you've got Robert Downey Jr. on there for God knows what reason, even though I love him as an actor. You've got a lot of just like this is a transitional period for SNL that it,
Oh, 100%. This was the sorry if the audio quality changed, my headphones died.
oh no,
Yeah.
you're good.
Um this was the period of SNL that no one was watching. Like the only reason why I remember seeing this performance was because when we were teenagers, they would show SNL reruns on Comedy Central all the time, and they would play episodes from this season or these two seasons. I can't remember which years it is. 85, 86, 87, like that spanning years.
Mhm.
And I saw the Replacements one, and I was like, "What? What? I can't believe I'm seeing this." Harry Dean Stanton was the host, and he's the one that introduced
That's
it.
right.
Um, but yeah, I just like you're right. I don't think it's like it's not. There's nothing offensive about it, other than they were really drunk. You can tell they're hammered drunk while they're doing it. And I think they might have like destroyed the dressing room or something too. But
Well, Harry Dean Stanton, who is fucking national treasure, RIP,
yeah,
he literally like they were trying to not let I I'm not necessarily sure on
I
the
think you. I
logistics
think
of
they were trying to keep the two of them away from each other. Right? Is that what it is?
kind of.
Yeah.
Well, essentially, he went backstage and he's like, "Oh, I'm Harry Dean Stanton," and they're just like, "Hey, you're cool. You want to drink with us?" And then like launch into stories about working on Alien, working with David Lynch, all the kind of cool shit you want to hear about, or
Yeah.
whatever Harry Dean is in the process of at the time. But like they're just getting along famously as friends, just getting fucking sloshed in the back, and Bob's just getting into his uh his Jekyll and Hyde persona and getting
Yeah.
fucked, putting on a dress. And then he trips while he's walking on stage, but recovers. Launch into Bastards of Young. It's amazing. The performance, people are losing their mind. And then I think they do Kiss Me on the Bus as their second performance.
They
But
do.
even at that point, they'd have been told like you're never fucking coming back. But they just went up there and nailed it. I think
Mm-hmm.
Bob throws his guitar in the air and then clocks himself in the head. Uh,
Yeah.
but it's a triumph for them. Like they think
Yeah.
they even if they're getting booted whatever from Dr. Evil, like they're still legitimate. It legitimizes in that they perform well. The audience loves it, and unfortunately though back home, like they got to see it, but they didn't. Like the Replacements never really got to see it because it immediately got pulled.
Yeah, they didn't get to see it. And like I said when I saw it on Comedy Central, I think there's a few other people out there that saw it too, but I don't think they ran that episode much. So
No.
it's so weird when I saw it because it's like it's kind of like that episode and the one with Fear are the two that you're never gonna see. I don't know if you've heard of that. Like there's a classic like um Fear, the punk rock band from LA in 81 or 82, 80 maybe, I don't know what year it was. 81 got invited to play on SNL because John Belushi was the host, and the only way that Belushi would host is if he could get them to play the show. And they had like a full-on slam mosh pit in the front, in the crowd, in the pit, like in 81 was like dudes from the Cro-Mags, Ian MacKaye and Henry Rollins and Jeff Nelson and all these people from DC, like and they played like a typical LA punk, what an LA punk kid would be like, but on national television, like stage diving and like just super fast hardcore music. It did not. I mean, I don't even think it made it all the way through. I think they may have made it all the way through the performance, but it got like taken off the air because it was like wild. You can find the footage on YouTube now, but like it was one of those things where it was like Middle America's first taste of hardcore, like underground hardcore, and people slam and then the replacements kind of did so like it's like Elvis Costello, Fear, and replacements, and I think Sinead O'Connor and can't remember who else. There's a few people that have been banned from SNL, but like those are the ones that I remember. The Fear stuff is great because it's like you can see Ian, you can see Henry, you can see everyone like slam dancing. This is just before Henry would join Black Flag and move to LA. So
Wow.
right at the
Well,
beginning.
you mentioned we kind of hinted at the interesting and almost strange bedfellows of comedians and actors that kind of sandwich themselves into iconic bands like the Replacements or um like Here Comes a Regular is one of my also favorite Replacement songs, and that ends up being on
Awesome.
to close out Tim, and also speaks to Westerberg's consciousness of the problems that were facing the band, especially when it came to alcoholism in the group. But I know Here Comes a Regular.
It's a great song about being it's a perfect snapshot of like even like a town like ours, like
Mhm.
Grand Rapids, because in the winter, I was just telling some people about this. There's nothing to do in the winter there because it's so fucking cold that when you're of age and you end up going to a bar, and if you go to like the crappy bars, you'll see the guys that have been doing that since they were in their 20s and they're like regulars there now. And it's like just like this culture of like drinking and just becoming a regular at a bar in your neighborhood. It's like a sad story, but it's almost like that song is the encompasses the feeling of like, yes, it is a sad story, but it's also gonna be your reality no matter what, because it's just what it is. You know what I mean? Like it's
No,
the
and I think
hard truth. It's a
it
hard truth to what your reality could be if you continue doing what you're doing. This is what it is.
right, and it speaks to Bob, and it's
Yeah.
and even Bob admitted that it was a great song. But really, I wanted to mention Here Comes a Regular as well, because George Wendt, Norm of Cheers, was a huge Replacements fan. And I think he, at least in some aspect, alluded to, oh, was that, do you think maybe he, like almost in a nebbish, like nerdy way, was like, maybe that's kind of like a song about Norm in Cheers, you know?
I mean, in a
Um,
way, it is. In a way, it is. It's the story of that character,
mhm.
but a real person. You know, that character that's just the every day after work, you go in there to your favorite bar and you just talk to the bartender and the other regulars around you. That is sure. Why not? Take it, Norm. Take it.
Take it, George.
Yeah.
Uh, anyway, so the band, had that kind of falling out, but over the 30 years, the recordings were let's see, a few weeks later, on February 4th, 1986, the band returned to New York City area to perform at Maxwell's in Hoboken, New Jersey. The show was professionally recorded by a crew hired by the band's label Sire Records for use in a possible live album. Over 30 years later, the recordings were finally released as a double album For Sale live at Maxwell's 1986. The tour ended abruptly in June 1986 because Westerberg injured his finger during a show at the Ritz in New York City.
That that Maxwell's record is great.
Yeah.
If you haven't listened to it, it's great. It's probably like they're actually like I have the other one that they released around the same time as the reissue for Don't Tell a Soul.
Mm-hmm.
But that
It's
Maxwell's one,
pop.
yeah, Dead Man's Pop is the reissue of Don't Tell a Soul, but that they put out a live record,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm looking at right now. Yeah, it's the it's the vinyl version of the two CD live CD discs that came with the Don't Tell a Soul reissue, and it's great. So like the Maxwell's one's really good. That recording's really good. I used to have shit hits a fan. I used to have that.
Which the artwork for was hand drawn by Chris Mars, who is also an excellent artist, by the way. And everyone should follow him on Instagram. He's great.
And then I sold that. But anyway, um, that record, Maxwell's and that other one are great. That's all I was going to say. Because if you haven't heard it, you should check it out. They're actually playing really well. It's great.
Yeah, no, and I think for everybody who felt gypped when they went and saw them, like say the punk rockers who wanted to hear Sorry Ma and Stink, I think you can appreciate it now. And if you're still living in that era in mindset, you need to, I don't know, touch grass, maybe go outside,
Just move on.
move on a little bit, buddy. Anyway, so now we're going to get into Pleased to Meet Me, and obviously when the band decided to fire Bob, which was hard, and I'm assuming was probably the hardest on Tommy.
Yeah.
And my heart goes out to Tommy. You know, he's developing his own alcohol issues at the time, and probably in the only way he knew how to, which was following his real big brother and really his pseudo big brother in Paul. Yeah. And Chris, I mean, Chris also had a moniker I don't know if you knew about this, where he would just dress up like a clown randomly.
Oh yeah. What was his Pappy?
Pappy. Yep. Pappy.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, the Pappy the Clown thing, when he would dress up, and yeah, that was bad news. You knew that was going to be bad news.
Bad news, and also just startling. And like, you know, you just turn around and your fucking drummer is dressed up like Bozo for a minute there. It's like, come on, dude.
Oh yeah.
And not even like a fun Bozo the Clown, like a mime weird like 20s throwback clown. It's like, come on, man, we're trying to play fucking Gary's Got a Boner and I got to look back and I'm confused if I'm in the Big Top or not. But so they fired Bob Stinson from the band, which he had founded, or he chose to leave, or a little of both. In either case, it was due to creative and personal differences between Stinson and the remainder of the band. Aggravated by Stinson's alcohol and drug abuse issues, they also fired. And this is always crazy to me because I forget, because to me, if there was one cheerleader, it was Peter Jesperson, but they did fire him.
Oh, yeah.
The same year. And Jesperson.
I think that was a well.
No, go ahead.
I was thinking about it. I'm like, I think it was a bad move on their part.
Mm-hmm.
I do, but also I think it was a good move, because I get it. I think Paul needed to work with someone that would help him realize what he actually had in his head, which was more of the, I don't want to say, for lack of a better term, softer songs, or the more singery, songwritery songs. He needed that. Jesperson was kind of that guy, but at the end of the day, he's still going to want like a rock record, right? And I think I think Paul just wanted to work with someone new and get new ideas. I think I do think in some ways it was a good idea, in some ways it was a bad idea. More so, it was a good idea probably to get rid of Jesperson so they could grow as a band.
I agree, and it's sad because Jesperson was he's the band dad or band mom, if you will. Like his love for the band is so apparent, especially when you read Trouble Boys and or watch any of the numerous like docs online, or just delve into the history of the band in general. I mean, Jesperson took his kids to see the Replacements when they had reunion shows later on in the story, and like it was his favorite. It felt like his baby, you know, and that sucks.
It sucks. It's like never good to hear that. You know, it's never good to get broken up with. And like we said, being in a band, and he was definitely a huge part of that band.
Mm-hmm.
When you get dumped, it's never fun.
No, been there. Speaking of which, shout out to our mutual friend and lovely lady. If you're interested, Replacements fans, in a masculine feminine energy, we can recommend a great Instagram if you want to follow it. Belle, shout out to you. Pussy flowers, if you will. Bob Stinson preferred the louder, faster style of the band's earlier music, while Westerberg was exploring new territory in ballads like Here Comes a Regular and Swing and Party. The remaining Replacements carried on as a trio for Pleased to Meet Me. And I would say this is the third of my top three Replacements records. Pleased to Meet Me.
I'll agree.
I'm glad we're in agreement. I feel like we were a little differing on our ISIS episode, but I think here we can agree.
Yeah, this I would definitely put like for me, you can interchange Let It Be Tim now with the new
Mhm,
mix. Tim, you could really change it. And before that, it was always Let It Be, then Tim.
mhm,
Now it's like either of them could be number one. So I don't know, whatever day it is, but third is always going to be this one for sure.
totally. This album, I'll be going to Memphis in the spring, and I'm planning on doing some Pleased to Meet Me music history
Checking
scoping
out.
out while I'm there. But not only because of that, I mean, obviously, this album was recorded in Memphis with big star producer Jim Dickinson, and Minneapolis guitarist Slim Dunlap took over on lead guitar for the subsequent tour and soon became a full member of the band.
Yep. He's not on the record though.
No, not on the record. This is well, Westerberg was pulling double duty, and
Yep.
um, this album, I God, it's again, for me, this is a 10 out of 10 as well. You've got obviously Can't Hardly Wait with a horn section. You've got Alex Chilton, which is in my top 10 favorite. Like that song just rips.
The Ledge.
The Ledge is amazing. And I think a lot of people were a little turned off by The Ledge when it came to kind of like the how dark it was specifically,
Yeah,
but I think it's just a beautiful song.
it's great.
I think when we really approach dark subject matters, and especially in a band as to me as authentic as the Replacements are, it can be done in a really beautiful way. IOU's an amazing song. I
Never
love,
mind. Never mind is
yeah,
great.
I dude, Skyway again, and I mentioned it before. Skyway is one of the most beautiful Paul Westerberg songs ever that I've ever heard.
It's really good.
Do. And it speaks to that again. Like I think I mentioned it earlier, like that love, that lost love vibe of his answering machine, and kind of
Oh,
that vibe that he Westerberg really nails. But I did just want to mention some of the standout tracks on there. This this album was a big deal for the band, and Tommy, even Hey Shadow is one of the demos from this, which features Tommy singing on it, and it's
yeah.
so fucking good.
The outtakes, yeah, it's great. I don't have this special edition. I don't know why I don't have this special edition, but I've got to get this. I've got to get that and Dead Man's Pop. I'm bummed.
Dead Man's Pop, you got it. Pleased to Meet Me. If you go to Rhino right now, or even if you go, I don't recommend this, but if you gotta get it, you gotta get it. But like Amazon has like a Black Friday deal for a lot of vinyl records. I saw the Tim Let It Bleed, and I saw Pleased to Meet Me on there, pretty well discounted for people who really want to get their hands on the vinyl. I mean, I get it. I'm tempted to pick up the Pleased to Meet Me on vinyl through that. Mostly because right now I've been doubling up on a lot of my LPs because my daughter is huge into vinyl at 15. Like she's got all the Smiths records now, and like we've been getting like the Cure vinyl for her too.
Oh, that's cool.
That's what you have to look forward to, my guy. And I'm reliving all my favorite albums through my daughter, and it's fucking awesome.
That's gotta be.
But like Slim Dunlap, I wanted to mention him too. Like sometimes the Lord offers us some layups in life, and with Slim, I feel like it was one of those situations. Granted, he was 35 and they were still in their mid to late 20s. I mean, you know, Tommy was like four years old at the time, but like Slim was such a crazy thing because he worked adjacent to Bob in some capacity, and Bob like recommended him, you know, to the band, which I mean, talk about something that is a smooth transition. Like if somebody leaves a band and they offer such a replacement for replacements.
How wild is that?
Totally. Also, I want to mention, I think when the Replacements first started, their band name was like Dog Breath, which is
Yeah,
which
that's
speaks
true.
to, which speaks to Bobby and Tom's fight. Everybody has these stupid names. I love the Replacements as a band name. Like, it's, to me, it's iconic. But
Oh yeah.
let's get into "Don't Tell a Soul" and "All Shut Down," and we'll start to wrap it up with when the band ends in their kind of Hyde Park or Chicago final show in 1990.
The opening band at that show was none other than who? The Goo Goo Dolls.
Of course it was.
And Paul Westerberg helped. Anyway, we'll get into it. Let's go back to Dead Man's Pop or Don't Tell
a
Us.
Soul. The band's next album, "Don't Tell a Soul," was a quieter, less punky affair, largely considered an attempt at mainstream success. I could see that.
100%.
While the move cost the Replacements the appreciation of some hardcore fans, the album has some notable songs such as "Aching to Be" and "I'll Be You," the latter of which topped the Billboard Modern Rock chart. The band then made a second appearance on network television on the short-lived ABC program International Rock Awards, for which they performed a typically energetic version of Talent Show. Talent Show is one of my favorite Replacement
The
songs.
song is great. The song is great, but off of this record, I'm gonna have to go with "Aching to Be" or "Will Inherit the Earth."
Mm-hmm.
And then
I love "Will Inherit the Earth."
I'll Be You is really great too.
I
Yeah,
feel
go ahead.
Dead Man's Pop, speaking of kind of circling back to the Ed Stason mix for Tim, Dead Man's Pop really brought out more for me than the original version of this with "Don't Tell a Soul," because something about this original mix had such an 80s
Oh yeah.
and a, almost to its detriment, flair to it that really it, to me, it kind of hampers the album. I would still put this album above "Sorry Ma" and "Hootenanny." Of the two latter, like I would say I like this album more than I do, say, "All Shook Down."
Yeah, this one's good. It's different because you're right. It's like, the record prior to it, we got Skyway and
Mhm.
a few jams like that that were a little less attacky, but overall, Pleased to Meet Me still had this like rock and roll attack to it. Uh,
Mhm.
but Don't Tell a Soul is vastly different.
Mhm.
The sound of the record is very calm. It's a lot calmer of a record. There might be some quote unquote raucous songs on it, like when what's that song? I want to say I can't. Anywhere is better than here. When Anywhere is better than here starts, and it's like, yeah, and you think it's gonna rock, and then it doesn't. It just goes to this like very calm like guitar riff. I mean, it's a very calm record. It never
Mhm.
really truly rocks out,
It
but
it
it's still great.
it's still great. Like, there's still a soul to it, if you
Yeah.
will. Like, it's not a vapid, like, again, like I mentioned this earlier, of the 7 albums and EP and singles and all that stuff, none of these releases are bad. None of these releases are even just like mediocre. Like, there's still a soul and a beating heart to this band.
However, I'll beg to differ when we get to the next record.
I know, I'm waiting for the
Because this record, for those that don't know, and we're probably going to get into it. I don't know if you're planning on doing it afterward, or after
oh
we get to the next record. But I feel like we should talk about the reissue of this record with this
mhm,
record. Because initially when they recorded it, and the sequence was different. Of the original release was supposed to be completely different than what we got on Don't Tell a Soul, and they were going to call it Dead Man's Pop, but they changed the name to Don't Tell a Soul. But when they did the reissue, they put out what was supposed to be the original mix by Andy Wallace or Matt Wallace. I want
mhm.
to say Wallace.
Wallace, you're right.
So they were supposed to put it out with the original mix that he did in the original order, and it
Matt
something happened.
Wallace, sorry.
Matt Wallace, yeah. and I don't know why they changed it, but they changed it into what would become Don't Tell a Soul, and that got commercially released, and it fell flat. It really did. When it came out, I mean, now we can look at it and listen to it and be like, it's great. It's got great songs. But when it came out, it fell flat. As a follow up to the 2 records or 3 records previous, it was like, what the fuck are these cats doing?
Mm-hmm.
With the reissue of Don't Tell a Soul, aka Dead Man's Pop, you got to hear what it was supposed to initially sound like, and when you hear it that way, it makes more sense as a logical follow-up to Pleased to Meet Me, Tim, and Let It Be. It
Mm-hmm.
really does. I mean, yes, the band is progressing and not playing as hard rockin' shit as they used to, but
Mm-hmm.
the progression doesn't seem as abrupt. It
Mm-hmm.
seems when you listen to the Dead Man's Pop version, for sure, in my opinion.
And to put this into context, what John's speaking on, this is 1989 when this is released, and Dead Man's Pop, or the Rhino release, you're talking September 2019. I mean, that's a huge gap in time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it speaks to this episode coming out that we're doing on this band, and kind of our relationship to the band and how it's evolved and how it will probably continue to evolve as we get older. This album specifically is obviously, it's a turning point for Westerberg, who is suffering with his own taking and continuing on with the band and trying to explore what he wants to do, and also what the bandmates want to do. And I think Chris is probably thinking, at least in my estimation at the time, like, I'm just going to be the drummer for the Replacements, and I'll just follow whatever Paul says, because he knows he's got the vision, and Paul did, even when he came in, like after hearing these guys blasting practice and with noise complaints from the cops and all that.
Once Paul walked into that basement, it was the Stinsons band, but Paul was steering the ship. But as the band continued to go forward and forward and forward, and where we're at now with Don't Tell a Soul, it's literally Paul's ship now. But since in this band with all these other guys, he's still got to do what we do in bands, and you got to compromise. But that's about to end.
True. True. Don't Tell a Soul received generally favorable reviews, with critics noting the music's more mature themes and increasing disillusionment, along with more of a positive outlook. Ira Robbins of Rolling Stone praised Westerberg's writing, stating that Don't Tell a Soul is full of his sharp-tongued wordplay and idiosyncratic musical structures. In February 1990, the album was ranked at number 16 in the Village Voice's 1989 Paz and Jop Critics Poll.
The Paz and Jop.
The Smashing Pumpkins' James Iha named the song Iha or whatever. Named the song. Yeah. Thank you. Named the song Aching to Be to his mixtape for Dreamers, commenting, "This is great because he's talking about a would-be artist who's trying to do bigger stuff, and it sounds like someone everyone knows."
Yeah. It's the story of, I was listening to it, and it's literally the story of a lot of people I've known. Not maybe the whole song, but certain parts of it are like people that I've known that have done like really great shit, and they're afraid to show it to people, or they don't like pursue it further, or they don't just like go, fuck it, I'm gonna go for it. They just kind of let it go, and then you're like, whatever happened to that? And like, yeah, whatever. I'm like, dude, it was really good. You should have did something with it. Like, there's a guy that we're mutually friends with in Grand Rapids, Dan Fisher.
Oh, I love him.
Okay. Yeah. So Dan, I met what year is it now? 2013. I met him in 2009. Maybe, yeah, sounds about right.
It's 2023, but I get what you're saying. 2009.
Did I say 2003?
You said 2013.
2013. Okay. 2023. You get what I mean?
No, I get you, brother.
But I met him, and he was, he's a great musician, great guitarist, and then he started this band called Little Village. And Little Village recorded this one record. They actually put out 2, but their first one that they actually were like playing shows and doing stuff for, they put out this one record. And it's literally, if you've never heard it, I don't even know if you can find it anymore. They might have a Bandcamp. I have no idea. But
I'll have to ask Dan. I know he's a huge Replacements fan too.
oh yeah, yeah. But they recorded this record, and it's just they are the song Aching to Be. They're the band because they like did it, and they were like played a few shows around Grand Rapids, but the record was so good that I was like, you guys need to tour. You need to do it. You need to get out on the road because you would be a huge band without question. Your
Mhm.
record is that good. And I still maintain that. I still maintain if they would have toured, they would have been huge, but they couldn't because Rob was in school to become a nurse. I think he's still a nurse. Maybe he's a doctor now. I have no idea. I haven't talked to Rob in ages. Rob, if you happen to hear this, hey. Um, but Rob was doing that. Super cool guy, really funny, great frontman, great voice, great guitarist. But he was doing school, and Matt Churchill, their bassist, was doing other things. Anyway, they are the song Aching to Be. They
Mm,
should have been huge, but only a select few people heard it or saw it. You know, as the song said, it always paints her canvas but never shows a soul. You know
mm,
what I mean?
mhm.
It was kind of like that.
Yeah, I, you know, uh, one of the great pleasures of my life is being able to show people those bands and those things. And you brought this up to me about Little Village and especially with Dan, who is also another sober buddy or dry buddy.
Mhm.
um I appreciate that we mentioned that because there's so many people that do so many phenomenal things, and I just don't want them to ever think like that's lost on
Yeah,
us.
that no one's noticing. You want them to know that someone at least notices.
Of course, always. And I applaud everyone who continues to create. And I yeah, I just talked to my buddy Jeff Ziegler, who's the pretty much the owner and operator of Uniform Recording out of Philadelphia, and he's worked with so many incredible bands like Nothing and Kurt Vile, and been like sound for War on Drugs and recorded War on Drugs and stuff like that. And like those
Yeah.
people who have the who continue to go in whatever respective way that they do, like just never give up, man. And with Westerberg at this time, when we talk about Don't Tell a Soul, he's definitely starting to get to where he becomes the person that he will be subsequently in the 90s and up until now, and after even reunions.
Yeah.
um I think your 20s and 30s are really spent trying to figure out who you're going to be pretty much forever. And Westerberg is really starting to see who that is in this era, and especially when we get to our final album, All Shook Down.
Which, in my opinion, is essentially just the first Paul Westerberg solo record.
Yes. In
That's
fact, it's mostly hired guns even in the studio. Like even Chris Mars is like, hey, I'm the drummer, and there's just a session drummer sitting there like
yeah. I
uh
think did Tommy play on it or no? He
he
played on it.
did. I mean, all shook. Okay, so following a disastrous tour opening for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Westerberg recorded a new album largely with session musicians, but was persuaded to release it as a replacements album. All Shook Down won critical praise and more mainstream attention, and its debut single, Merry Go Round, again topped the modern rock charts. However, the album's many guest players and Mars' quick departure from the band following the album's release led many to wonder about the band's future. They also received a nomination for a Grammy Award for Best Alternative Music Album.
The song "Merry-Go-Round" is the only good song on that record.
I would argue that All Shook Down, the title track, is actually my favorite on that one.
I could not. I actually went the other day, like, you know, after getting the new release,
Mm-hmm.
I went back and I listened to all of them, and I was like, all right, we're gonna listen to All Shook Down. I haven't listened to this record in forever, and it is the only one I've never bought because I hate it.
I'm with you on despising it, in that as somebody who is a massive Replacements fan as you are, and it's
I'm like looking at the track list and I'm like, Merry-Go-Round is good. Sadly Beautiful is good. Been Out of Shape is all right. Been Out of Shape was actually a band took that North Lincoln used to play with a lot, who was called Ben Out of Shape.
Oh, cool.
They got their name from that, and they had a great songwriter named Jamie, and Jamie passed away too young from partying too hard, but Jamie was amazing. So that's how I always tied that song to them, because and him and the memory of like hanging out with him. So that's why I guess I like it. But yeah, to your point, All Shook Down is a great song, but overall, I'm just like looking at the track list and I'm like, this thing sucks.
I get you. Well, part of my my love for the song All Shook Down is that it's Westerberg in his most decrepit alcohol abuse state. Like he's recording that flat on his back in the studio, just moaning and groaning from like years of alcohol and drug abuse.
Yeah.
And it comes through like that struggle in that performance. And so like for me, it the vibe of that song just fits. But the release of it really is, you know, the death knell of the Replacements as a whole. And they all go on in their own respect. Chris Mars goes on to record his own solo work. Bash and Pop is a band that Tommy fronts, and he also goes on to become the bassist for Guns N' Roses, which is fucking
yeah. You froze there for a minute.
Oh, sorry.
You were saying something about them breaking up, and
well, mostly I was saying that they all went on to do their own musical careers. The Hyde Park show is, like you said, that I think that's when they have music fests around 4th of July every year in Chicago, like Taste of Chicago and stuff like that. And this Hyde Park show is crazy because they were signed to it ends up being the promoter shaking his fist like, you guys get back on stage, you have more music to play, but they're just like, fuck it, we're done, get in the car and leave. And it ends up being the final performance is is so Replacements in that they end up having like the sound guy and the roadies getting up on stage playing the instruments. So essentially the Replacements are replaced.
Got it. That's good. That's very classic them.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, like after this record, I mean, even when this record came out, I think promotion for it was shit. Like no one cared. Like I just think like the label at the time kind of maybe promoted it a lot, but I don't even think you said that they toured, but I don't even think they finished the tour. Maybe they did. I have no idea.
No, it was fill-in musicians as well. I mean, there's a lot of that, and to speak to our era of going to record stores and thumbing through, you know, say half off clearance bins, I saw All Shook Down in every single one of those.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's not a great record, but I think it was something that had to happen because we got Paul Westerberg's 14 songs out of it, which is a great record.
Yes, I do love that record.
He didn't have to answer to anybody anymore. He didn't have to like, he could just do what he wanted to do. And he I guess he kind of did on All Shook Down, but at the same time, he had to make it feel like a Replacements record still.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know, but I feel like 14 songs is like, okay, he finally got his solo record. He finally got what he wanted to do, and he nailed it. And it was great, and it was better than All Shook Down. And that should have been the final Replacements record, but it wasn't. And he also did fucking single soundtrack. The 2 songs that he has on singles are fucking great.
Mm-hmm.
The follow-up record, which is called Eventually, I think that's what it's called. That record's good too. But then after that, I kind of lost touch with Paul. I didn't really follow up on the rest of them. And then Tommy went on to do Bash and Pop,
mm-hmm.
which their record's good. If you've never heard it, check it out.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, I would call Tommy almost like a Westerberg Jr. as well. Like there's a vibe to his singing that's great, but he's also just rock and roll incarnate. The dude rules. He shows up in interviews and I just love him. I love all the members of this band, and RAP to Bob Stinson, who passed away. Unfortunately, there are deaths in the world that are surprising, and then there are deaths in the world that are surprising and shocking. As shocking as Bob Stinson's death was, it wasn't surprising given his battles with addiction and the touring life and his own mental issues. Unfortunately,
I don't think when it happened, I think it wasn't, you know, like you said, it wasn't a shock to all of them, but it was still
surprising.
huge, profound loss.
Mm-hmm. Oh, did I lose you?
That's about Paul or about Bob.
Mm-hmm.
It came out, I think Bob died in 2000, or I'm sorry, 1995.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say that's right, 1995. Let me see. Yeah, so it is on eventually, or on 14. So I can't remember. It's around. It's I think it's eventually. I can't remember. Don't quote me on that.
No, you're fine.
But the one on one of his first two solo records, he definitely has a song about Bob, and it's a bummer because I don't think he ever got a chance to repair his relationship with Bob Stinson. I think it was pretty strained. Yeah, it's really sad.
I mean,
It's
Westerberg was at his funeral, and obviously, I think he paid his respects
yeah,
post-mortem. But like,
he didn't get a chance to do it in life, and that's kind of, I think it's kind of haunted him. I don't think he'll ever really admit it, but I think it's kind of haunted Paul most of his life. Because I mean, why wouldn't it? I mean, that was like, you know, his brother. They were
mhm,
fucking brothers. But they grew up together and they created this fucking thing together. Like it's a big deal, you know.
totally. And I think life's too short to hold grudges, or at
Oh
least be
yeah,
mad longer than a week when it comes to people you love and work so intimately with. But you know, in retrospect, the band has, I think, more than stood the test of time. They've redefined music for many people in many different places all over the world. Westerberg is still an amazing singer, and I've seen videos of him online in reunions from 2013 Riot Fest uh, and seen interviews with his Tommy on different programs and different podcasts. And these guys are all infinitely fascinating and continue to be inspirations for tons of people. But
still bummed. I'm still bummed I didn't go to see the reunions. Bummed. I should have gone. I just didn't do it. I feel bummed about it, but whatever. It's fine. I think it's meant to be. I don't want to spoil my I don't want to spoil my relationship to the band by seeing them. I think because I've had it done before where I've seen bands like reunite and I've seen them and it's just ruined the band for me. That
I get
sucks.
that. I get
But
that.
like I was very scared. Like the botch show. I was like, I don't know. I saw them back then and they were fucking incredible. So I don't know, like, is this gonna ruin it? And it didn't. They were actually better. they were
That's
they
that's
were
awesome.
they're really great. But yeah, like it. I'm glad that the replacements are continually like. I feel like now the replacements are one of those cornerstone bands that kids that get into alternative music they have to go through. Like
Mm-hmm.
obviously, when you're getting into music in general, like Nirvana is like the second step after like the Beatles or something, which is incredible to think about now. Nirvana is a kind of band like the Beatles, right? That's fucking wild. Where it's like you get into rock music, you listen to the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Nirvana. Like as when you're a little kid, you know what I mean?
Well, but if you think about it in scope of history and how in its infancy rock music is, Nirvana was closer to the Beatles than we are to Nirvana now.
Oh, for sure, for sure. That's wild to think about. It's
Mhm.
insane to think about. And I think any kid that gets into punk music or metal or whatever, they have to go through that replacements phase. Either you
Mhm.
get it or you don't. You know what
Or
I
you
mean?
don't, or you
But
don't, and you just listen to.
I think most people that listen to the replacements like them. I have yet to meet someone that tells me that they don't like that band.
Oh yeah, and I've talked about this many times with like people who are maybe music fan lights or big music fans who just haven't like necessarily dived in, but they'll say like, yeah, Bastards Are Young, great song, or I Will Follow. Yeah, it's on the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 soundtrack. I love it. Or whatever. I mean,
Is it really?
which
Is it on?
sounds terrible,
They
but
had a soundtrack. Are they on that soundtrack?
they are. Yeah, actually, in fact, I'm pretty sure the movie ends with I Will Follow,
That's
which is
so
great.
great.
Which is a great pull for James Gunn to throw that out there, because that means like kids like my kids are going to hear that song subconsciously on at least that level and be like, oh shit, like that ties them to a good memory of watching that movie with their dad. So
Get that money, Paul Westerberg. Get that money. Holy shit. Oh no.
and with that we wrap up our 2.5 hour mega episode on the Replacements. John, I couldn't thank you enough for being on this and being my music guy. This was a pleasure.
This was fun. I like talking about the Replacements. I can talk about them forever.
Dude, we rolled into this free, nice and easy, and this flew by. But I wanted to give you a chance with you on to talk or promote or whatever, anything going
Sure.
on with you.
So I play in a band, two bands. One's called Amusement. We've got two records coming out this winter. Well, they're 7 inches. I don't want everybody to think they're like two full lengths because that's fucking insane. But they're two 7 inches, two songs on each 7 inch. And they should be available either at the end of December or beginning of January. But we have Bandcamp, Amusement 2. They're just type in Amusement Portland, Oregon, and
I'll have a
Google.
link in the episode description.
It'll come up. And then I started another band with some buddies out here. We're looking for a singer. If you're in the Pacific Northwest area, which I doubt you're going to be if you're listening to this, but if you are, we're looking for a singer. We're called Spares. I'll send that link over to Ryan to put in the episode description as well. It's kind of cool. We don't have anything planned and coming out because obviously we don't have a singer. We haven't got any shows booked because we don't have a singer. But we do have 10 songs and they're really good. Doing that. What else am I doing? That's it. That's all I'm doing right now. And I'm waiting to have a kid. And that's
the most important part of your life right now, my friend.
Yeah.
But doing these things and the music is an added bonus that your kid is going to gobble up one day. And understanding your father, your parents is a key ingredient to growing and getting older. So I'm so ecstatic for you, man. You're going to make a great dad. And I'm looking forward to seeing some babby pics when they come. But yeah, you can follow us at Zanzizi Podcast on Instagram. We have that. We have a Discord you can join if you want to suggest episodes. You can email us zanzizipodcast@gmail.com. Also, we have merch. I have stickers, tons printed off. John, I got to send you a t-shirt when I get a chance, but I have t-shirts and stuff I've given to everybody that's been in this inaugural first season of this show. It's super successful for us. I appreciate everybody who's done the 5-star reviews and recommended to a friend. I see that stuff. It helps us exponentially, but I'm totally grateful for the experience so far. These things, sometimes it can be nerve-wracking, but it's so much fun to get a chance to sit down and talk with your buddies about cool shit like the Replacements. So
I agree.
Anyway, man, that's been your episode. It's been great having you on, and we will see you next week. I'm going to play now. You won't necessarily hear this right now, John, but in the future you will. This is a cover of Kiss Me on the Bus by the my friendly co-host today on this episode, North Lincoln, his band North Lincoln, covering from a compilation. This is Kiss Me on the Bus by the Replacements, covered by that band.
Thanks, Ryan.
Of course. Have a great one, folks. All right.